And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the deaths involved. No fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Go on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, says no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. 3 minutes past 6. The sun is up and it is absolutely shining, blazing through the windows here at the top of the tower on the 17th floor of News UK. Here we are at the home of common sense, at talkTV, at Talk Radio, at the place where everything happens, the absolute sort of hub of the world right now, because we started this story yesterday and we will not end it today, but it will go on for quite some time. The Brexit betrayal of Keir Starmer. So Times has got this: Starmer hails Brexit reset as new era in EU relations. Yeah, it's a new era in EU relations, all right. We're bending over and they're giving it to us. The Sun says, done up like a kipper. Peter Bleksley's here. I think you'll understand when I say, Peter, this is one of the most ignominious performances by any Prime Minister, surrendering basically all of Britain's rights to a foreign power. That's basically what's happened here.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
What a betrayal.
Absolutely right. Starmer's surrender, the front page of the Daily Mail, and the Daily Telegraph, kiss goodbye to Brexit, with a ghastly picture of Keir Starmer kissing Ursula von der Leyen. The woman he seems to like to kiss quite a bit. Daily Star goes a slightly different way. They've got Keir Starmer done up in a gimp outfit. I'm not quite sure why they've done that, but it says PM's in a tight spot. Boris Johnson called him a gimp in an orange suit or something else, so we'll get stuck into that a little bit later on. Nobody knows why. Gary Lineker is also still front and centre of the news this morning, and Peter Bleksley's got a story about him which we will impart to you in the fullness of time. But it basically turns out that his own goal, by kiboshing his own career, has cost him not far off £1 million. What an absolute plonker. There's nothing worse than a guy who thinks he's clever who turns out to be just a bit thick. And I'm afraid that's what our Gaza has turned out to be. 0344 499 1000. Also, Lucy Connolly today will find out if she's going to be let out of prison, if she's going to get her sentence commuted in some way, which I think is very good news. And also, the worst news for Starmer of all is that inflation figures coming out tomorrow. It's set to go up to 3.3%, which will completely and utterly do away with anything that he thought he did yesterday, which was in any way a good deal. There's possible peace in Ukraine as well. There's so much going on. As ever, we will bring it all to you in our own inimitable style. We want to hear from you, of course, as well. 0344 499 1000. Send us a voice note. Send us a message on 87222. Start your message with the word talk. And you can find us, of course, on Twitter or X, if you prefer, at talkTV. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And welcome to Talk, and welcome to the home of common sense. Peter Bleksley, officially, a very good morning to you. Former Metropolitan Police Detective, of course, a man of great mystery and means and all kinds of other things. We'll get to Lineker in a minute, because I want to hear the story that you've got for us. But let's talk about this betrayal. As I watched last night with sort of incredulity, the ridiculousness of the Labour government trying to make out that this is a great deal for Britain, trying to make out that, you know, they started off saying yesterday morning when we were here, because before 9 o'clock they'd already given away the fishing rights, right? They started to say, you know, this is a new era, this is a new beginning for our relations with the European Union. When they realised that everyone went, hang on a minute, you've basically done what we did in the referendum, except the reverse of it, without having a referendum. So you've taken it upon yourselves to cancel democracy. They then changed the message. The message was now, by yesterday evening, well, the Brexit deal was never really done properly by Boris Johnson, so we've now done it properly. And that's what they're kind of trying to now contain themselves with. They're trying to make out that we've had to do this because the Tories screwed it up.
Keir Starmer has a slavish love and adoration for all things European Union.
He does, doesn't he?
We know this, of course. He voted how many times? Dozens upon dozens of times to frustrate Brexit. Yeah. He was like the head honcho of wanting a second referendum.
Yeah, when the great British public actually finally voted to leave the European Union, he tried to keep us in it.
Oh, like hammer and nail. Yeah. He was determined to try and scupper it at every single turn, every opportunity that there was. Yeah. And the Commons records show it all. He voted repeatedly to frustrate it, to stop it, and he was that leading light in trying to campaign for a second referendum.
Yes.
So we know, and of course we see this. We've seen it ever since he's been PM with his trips to the EU, with his absolute adoration.
Loves at the Euro summit, doesn't he?
Of course, and yesterday preening himself and shouting from the rooftops, the first ever UK-EU summit, like no British politician had ever spoken to a European politician before. Get a grip, Starmer.
Yeah, really.
Who the hell does he think he is?
I know. Who does he think he is? I'll tell you who he doesn't think he is. He doesn't think he's the Keir Starmer of last year, because in 2024 he said this.
I have repeatedly said that there's no case for going back into the EU, and that includes the single market and the customs union. Equally, we will not be a rule taker. The rules and laws of this country will be made in Parliament according to the national interest. But that does not mean that a Labour government wants to lower standards on food, wants to lower standards on people's rights at work. The Labour Party has been completely consistent on those issues for many, many years. There's no surprise here. And incidentally, this is also government policy.
Unfortunately for Keir Starmer, the Labour Party have not been consistent about this over years, and let's see what he had to say for himself yesterday about the landmark deal.
Today we have struck this landmark deal with the EU, a new partnership between an independent Britain and our allies in Europe. This is the first UK-EU summit. It marks a new era in our relationship. And this deal is a win-win. It delivers what the British public voted for last year. It gives us unprecedented access to the EU market, the best of any country outside of the EU or EFTA, all while sticking to the red lines in our manifesto about not rejoining the single market, the customs union, and no return to freedom of movement.
I don't know who he thinks he's kidding, right? According to the Sun front page, Starmer agrees to take rules from Brussels, bow down to EU judges, pay billions for the privilege, throw open our borders, let the French plunder our fish for 12 years, and in return we get 0.3% growth by 2040.
The brass neck of this bloke is absolutely unbelievable.
What's wrong with him?
When he says this is what the British public voted for last year,
right.
That's a veiled, pathetic reference to the general election.
Yeah, for which 20% of the public voted for Labour, right?
Yeah, and of course that general election was a protest vote.
Yeah, it was.
We know we always hear about by-elections being protest votes.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a general election that was in its entirety a protest vote to get rid of the lamentable Tories. People didn't elect Starmer on the basis of a manifesto that everybody bought into by an ideology that was going to revamp this country and take it into a different direction and make it Great Britain once again. Millions of people voted simply to get rid of the Tories.
They did.
Which is why their popularity, Starmer and this government's popularity, is already tanking because people's protest vote was realised, it did get rid of the Tories, that so many people are going, look what we've got.
I know.
This is not what we wanted.
Exactly right. And I mean, people said, you know, it can't get any worse than the Tories. And I used to say to them, well, it can actually. And so it's proved. It has got an awful lot worse. Richard Littlejohn in the Mail today, we're dealing with a Prime Minister who hates Britain, or at least the British people who embraced Brexit. Now we've all been done up like a kipper. And again, fishermen's fury as Starmer allows EU trawlers access to British waters until 2038. And of course, you know, this narrative, as I say, which has been planted and sown very, very heavily by, you know, the sort of the mainstream Remainer media. All they're saying is that, you know, oh, this is just a sensible deal. This is just a better way of us dealing with Europe. Because of Brexit, we haven't been able to deal with Europe properly. No, because of Europe, we haven't been able to deal with Europe properly. The EU have completely stymied and scuppered every single deal and every single opportunity that they could have had to be in a good relationship with the UK. They hated Brexit and they tried to punish us for it.
I need now to make a huge apology to everybody watching, everybody listening, because I am about to put them off their cornflakes. Because this is something that has not been picked up by the papers, but I saw it last night. Darren Jones, MP.
I watched him as well.
Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Who knows nothing about football, as he quite happily admitted.
Well, I think
how can you be British and know nothing about football?
I think there's quite a few other things he knows nothing about, one of them being finance, to be perfectly frank with you. But anyway, Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
And eating meat, he's a vegan, you know. So.
Yeah. So Rachel Reeves' sidekick, second in command, he was repeatedly pushed last night about how much all of this is going to cost us.
Oh, yeah.
Because as appalling as so much of it is, we are actually going to have to pay for this in cash pound notes by the tens of millions, if not more. And when he was pushed, he would not answer that question, when clearly he knew the answer. But they are not telling us. That's the big story that is not a story today. How much is all of this going to cost? It's going to be a fortune.
It is going to be a fortune, and worse than that is that we've tied ourselves, thanks to Starmer, into the regulatory framework of the European Union, which is what people wanted to get away from, which is why people voted to leave in the first place, because they didn't like the fact that if you run a business in this country, you are hidebound by some rules that are made in Brussels by people that you didn't elect and who sit there lying behind the hog. I mean, Sky News last night, I was watching it, they kept referring to Ursula von der Leyen as a world leader. She's not a world leader. She was appointed as the head of the European Union, as the commissioner in charge of it, right? That is not an elected position. She is not a world leader. She is a civil servant, superannuated she may be, but she's not elected. She has not really been given any kind of mandate with any kind of power whatsoever. She is basically an office clerk with a big salary.
The positions that both of those people who flanked Starmer yesterday...
Yeah, that other bloke, Pizza, whatever his name is.
They're not elected into those positions. They're appointed into them.
Yeah.
So it's an absolute fallacy.
By the people inside the European Commission. They're not even appointed by, actual leaders of countries.
Yes. The junket elects its own, appoints rather, the people it wants to appoint. I mean, the trade unions to drive its narrative.
Yeah, the trade unions are more democratic than this lot. I mean, it's unbelievable. The other thing which has been spotted is that in the Telegraph they say that the future government's situation, because Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch have both said we will rip this thing asunder, we will rip it apart as soon as we win the next election, which I'm sure Nigel Farage will. A future British government would technically be able to rip up the terms of the deal. However, any such move would allow the EU to respond with huge trade tariffs.
Yes.
So they basically locked in a clause, which they're calling the reform clause, which apparently would mean that it would make it very, very expensive for all of this to be ripped up.
Absolutely.
So they put a sort of delayed bomb in there.
Yes. So should another party kick this lamentable government into touch at the next general election, whatever party that is that forms a government and wants to run this country will not be able to get out of so much of this without being fined, punished, sanctioned. This government voted to sanction its own nation.
Its own nation,
It's absolutely appalling.
It is appalling, and this is why people voted to leave in the first place. In 2016, the elites got it wrong, the media got it wrong, everybody got it wrong. The people of this country spoke. They didn't want to be part of basically what is effectively a protection racket, people who basically punish and beat you if you don't behave when you're inside of it, and when you leave it, they come and try and punish and beat you some more for leaving. It's the worst case scenario for everybody, right? And I've got loads of messages here, so I better start getting through some of them. One here from Peter, he says, "Morning, Mike. The tragedy is that Starmer seems to actually believe what he's saying. We know that he's a liar and a hypocrite. His awful crew of amateurs are carrying on with the destruction of this country and what it used to stand for. Can it get worse? Yes. They've got another 4 years. Sean in Gloucester, I'm absolutely incandescent with rage. Keith Starling, despite all the lies up until now, has betrayed the British people and democracy. This total cretin has just put the final nail in the coffin of the Labour Party. The only explanation is that he wants to ruin our once great country. Nigel will be Prime Minister. We need an election now." And I mean, you have to say that Starmer cannot electorally recover from this. They're done. Nobody's going to vote for them in 4 years' time.
No, absolutely, because of the absolute betrayal.
Yeah.
And they're not even a year in to this government. And look what they've done.
I know.
Really.
I know.
To pensioners, like the cuts that are coming, to disabled people, to this utter betrayal.
To farmers, to business.
Yeah.
So everything.
And the list goes on.
Yeah.
It really does. It's staggering. But his sycophantic brown-nosing of all the European leaders is truly appalling. And I think the one conclusion that we can draw from all of this is that he's spineless.
He is spineless. And somebody called Lucy Harris, who used to be an MEP for the Brexit Party, made a very good observation day before yesterday, which I read out yesterday, and it is basically that Labour are so frightened of government now because they made such a dog's breakfast of it, that actually they now prefer to be governed by Brussels because they can blame them for everything that goes horribly wrong, as it will do. We're expecting inflation figures tomorrow to say that inflation's gone up to 3.3%. That's a big jump from 2.6 to 3.3, and that's just the beginning, because no matter what they tell you, they are ruining the economy, they are ruining the country, and they are ruining any possibility that we might have in the short term of being a success.
And courtesy of yesterday, we will now be subjected to directives, rulings from the European Court of Justice.
Yes.
Because much of what happened yesterday ties us back into that.
Yeah, and they're so pathetic that they tried to make out, again, in the early stages of yesterday morning, but they soon forgot about it because they realised it wasn't much of a sop to the intelligent people of this country. They were going on about, oh, well, but look at what we've got for you. You can go through an e-gate when you go on holiday. I mean, do they really think people are that stupid? As I pointed out yesterday, it's actually better to go through a British channel than it is to go through an EU channel when you go on a holiday, because there's nobody in it.
When I get home, I fully expect to see a geezer with a beret fishing in my garden pond, right? And when I say, "Oi, what are you doing here?" He says, "I've got the right to fish here for 12 years, mate."
That's it.
You're in my garden, it's my pond.
Yeah, and you've got to feed him some free sausages while you're at it as well, whether he likes them or not. I mean, all this business about, well, now we can export sausages to France. They don't want British sausages in France. They don't eat them. They're not interested in our sausages.
Yeah.
You know, free the sausages is what old Starmer keeps coming out with. You know, meanwhile, by the way, they've arrested a third man. I know we can't talk about it because it's a charge, right? I just want to put it down on paper. They've arrested a third man in the firebombing case. So far, a 21-year-old Ukrainian, a 26-year-old, we don't know where he's from, but he was at Luton Airport, either coming in or going out, and they've now arrested a third bloke who's, I think, 35, in Chelsea.
Yeah.
The plot thickens, as far as I'm concerned.
I wouldn't want to jeopardise any legal proceedings, of course, but trust me, going to Luton Airport's a crime in itself.
Well, that is definitely something.
It's an appalling airport.
You'd have to look into, yeah, absolutely right. Let's have a look at what Kemi Badenoch had to say on the Brexit deal yesterday.
It is nearly a decade after the referendum, and Labour are reopening those Brexit battles of the past and taking us backwards, not forwards. We should be talking about how we use the opportunities we have, having left the European Union. Instead, today, we found out that after months of secret negotiations, away from Parliament, the media and the public, the Labour government, Keir Starmer's government, has surrendered many of the gains we secured, our sovereignty, our money, and control over our laws to the European Union.
Yep. And again, as Starmer tries to make out, we're just kind of putting all of that in the past and we're not going to try and resurrect any of the old problems, right? Well, that's all very well for him to say, but actually that's exactly what he's done. Because what he's done is he's sort of awoken the sleeping giant once again of ordinary people in Britain who are sick to death of being dictated to by a bunch of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. And that's where we've gone back to.
Which is what led to the 2016 referendum.
Yes, right.
And how can this bloke, who is Prime Minister of the country, not get a grip of that?
I
not
know.
Understand it, not realise
I know. It's shocking, absolutely shocking. We'll obviously have loads more of this going out. We've got Priti Patel throughout the show. We've got Daniel Hannan coming on to talk to us as well. We've got so much going on. We've got Sarah Poachin from the Reform Party. Keep your messages coming, keep your voice notes coming as well, because we are terribly, terribly hopping mad about all of this. Jonathan, over to you.
Good morning, Mike. This is Jonathan here. Two-tier Keir is leading Britain into Starmageddon with this so-called EU reset deal. He tells us that big business loves this deal. Of course, big business will love it because they can reduce their costs. And their costs are transferred to the British taxpayer, who will in turn pay a concession fee to Brussels. Brussels now will tell the British yet again what they can and cannot do. Starmer is a clear danger to the UK. He is duplicitous. And this is the death of Brexit by 1,000 cuts. We must do everything we can to get rid of this dangerous Prime Minister.
Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Absolutely right. I think many, many people will echo your sentiments. We've got some amazing messages coming through. Keep them coming. We'll be here, of course, until 10 o'clock. There's lots more to do. This is Morning Glory.
us.
EU fisheries are all still allowed access, particularly French and Spanish boats, but French, this is the big sticking point for them, into British waters currently anyway. But the idea was going to be gradually going down and down and down over the years, and that would allow the British fishing industry to build back up because of they have exclusive access to our fishing waters. That's kind of done and dusted. Now, Nigel Farage, a Reform UK leader, said if this is true, this is the end of the British fishing industry. I assume that Keir Starmer thinks, if that is the case, that that's a price worth paying.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The return of the sausage.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:25. I'm Mike Graham. Peter Bleksley is here with me, and he's got a story to tell you about Gary Lineker. First, though, how about this? Morning, Mike. There is no more than how dare you plebs vote against what we elites want. We know better than you, so bloody angry, Mike, says Maggie in London. And again, this is exactly what happened in 2016. You know, what do you know about it? You're not part of the elite. And the idea that he's going around Starmer telling us all that all big business is in favour. Well, of course they are. They were in favour of staying in the European Union in 2016. They were not in favour of leaving it, because for them the globalisation of the world is a good thing, because they can hire a bunch of people to come in and work for them and pay them less money than have to pay people in this country.
The people spoke.
Yeah.
In 2016.
Right, and we've never been forgiven for doing it.
No, exactly. And of course, anybody that dares put their head above the parapet and say they voted for Brexit gets sneered at by the liberal elitism.
Must be some kind of racist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, of course, there's all the smart, inverted commas, arguments they put forward. So it's just being frustrated. Starmer's absolute adoration for all things European, beyond just yesterday, and beyond the rules that we will now have to accept from the European Court of Justice. But look at the old European Court on Human Rights, for example, and all the nonsense decisions that have been handed down by them. The European Commission into human rights and the such like, which so many people thought they were voting to leave.
Yes.
But haven't.
No.
9 years later. Still cemented to them.
Yeah, because the blob has made sure that we remained as close as we could possibly to European rules by stymieing any kind of attempts to change our connections with Europe. You know, and the sort of the various think tanks that work around Westminster. So many MPs that we saw in 2019 and beyond, desperately trying to make sure that we didn't actually leave. You know, the Tories made a hash of it, no question, but they were not helped. They were stymied and stopped from doing whatever it was they wanted to do. And Priti Patel will, I'm sure, tell us that when she comes on.
Yeah, and I was speaking to a senior political figure who I'm afraid will have to remain nameless just the other day, talking about that very thing, the civil service blob, the power of it, and this person whose leanings might become very clear when I say the next line. We were discussing about the challenges of running a country and how difficult it is and such like. And this person said, which is one reason why you need to keep politicians as far away from it as you possibly can. Right. So that gives you an idea of which side of the argument this person might have come from. It is very difficult, and I understand why the civil servants, some of course who have very strong political allegiances, leanings, and will set out to frustrate. Yeah. But it's why in a true democracy, if that's what we want to try and convince the world we are, then elected politicians should have the whip hand.
Yes, they absolutely should, and that's the same for when it comes to the law. As the laws are made in this country, the laws should not be made by judges. The judges are there to carry out the instructions of the people who make the laws, who are in the administration of lawmaking, who are in Parliament. That's what the law is meant to be for. You know, judges will interpret the law, and that's up to them, but they don't make the law, and they shouldn't be criticising politicians, as they've tried to do over Europe particularly, about all of this. But let's talk about something slightly different before we carry on with this. We've got so many messages. I will get to all of them. Please do keep sending them in. 03444991000. Let's have a look at Gary Lineker, right? Because he, I don't think came as a great surprise to everybody, but it was a shock to some people that he was announced on the front page of The Sun yesterday as quitting the BBC. It now turns out they probably fired him. Let's have a look at his statement.
I've stood up for minorities and humanitarian issues and against all forms of racism all of my life, including, of course, anti-Semitism, which I absolutely abhor. There's no place for it and never should be. So I think it's best for all concerned that I step down from BBC presenting duties altogether and not do next season's FA Cup or World Cup. The final day of the Premier League season on Sunday will be my last show.
When you think about the words that he just said there, it's hard not to laugh, isn't it? Because here he is making himself out to be the great saviour of minorities. He particularly dislikes anti-Semitism, which is obviously why he posted a tweet of a Jewish person portrayed as a rat in a way that the Nazis did in the 1930s. And then he goes on to say, it's a bit like Brass, remember Brass Eye?
Yeah.
You know, as a result of my unfortunate run-in with the anti-Semitism problem, I won't be presenting the FA Cup final. I mean, sorry, you know, who do you think you are?
I suspect that in his head, he probably thinks he should have been appointed Pope.
Yes.
You know,
I'm sure he does.
He is that sanctimonious, isn't he?
He really is.
From his perch on high.
As a result of my defending of the minorities of this world, I won't be able to join you for the World Cup in 2026.
Yeah.
I mean, who do you think he's kidding?
I mean, really, the ludicrousness of
Now,
it.
you've got a story to tell us about, which the Mail have published this morning, so tell us about it.
Yeah, if anybody wants to read the my full comment piece today, it's page 13 of the Daily Mail. I had the huge misfortune back in August 2019 to work with Mr. Gary Lineker for a day.
Yeah.
It was on an online advertising campaign.
Right.
And I was playing a small role in that. So it's a day's work for me. And anyway, so I got to where we needed to be. In fact, I booked a hotel the night before to ensure that I was on time.
Yes.
Because I'm an old school detective, you see, and timekeeping is absolutely
actually very important.
Crucial.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. A lack of punctuality is a huge sin in our book.
Yeah.
And so I turned up in plenty of time, of course. He was late.
Yeah.
He was an hour late. Now,
An hour late?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot late.
Yeah, and when you've got a production day lined up and all the kind of filming is blocked and set, and you're going to do this at that time and that at that time.
Yeah, stop for lunch, all of that.
Exactly, and then the wrap time for the finish of the day is organised, and there's plenty of people there.
Yeah.
Camera, sound, production, all of that. When somebody turns up late, it puts pressure on everybody for the entire
And it puts everyone on
rest
edge,
of the
doesn't
day.
it, as well?
It does, it does. So that wasn't very good.
Sure, he was apologetic for it, though, was he?
No, well, I must have not heard it if he was.
Yeah.
And basically, I found him to be thoroughly unpleasant. He was very dismissive of a junior member of staff that day, and I still, to my huge regret, beat myself up because I didn't challenge him at the time.
And that's also a very good sign of somebody's character, isn't it? If you get the sort of the star turns up and he's dismissive of people that are kind of working for him, that's obviously a bad move, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And then at one point during the filming, there was a book on footballers, and in that book was my childhood hero, Rodney Marsh, great star for Queen's Park Rangers when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I pointed this out to Lineker just by way of making a bit of conversation. And he was utterly dismissive. All he did was just came out with a very, very unpleasant comment about a man I just told him was my childhood hero. You know, and then I just thought, I really can't be doing with this man anymore, and I'm going to steer away from him as much as I can. But one little moment that made me chuckle was we were filming in the house of a guy called Colin Furze.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Colin Furze is huge on YouTube.
Right.
He's an absolute genius. He's bonkers and brilliant in equal measure.
Right.
He's made a real name for himself by doing things around engineering, for example, fitting a rocket to a skateboard or something and breaking all kind of land speed records and this kind of stuff. The guy is brilliant, an absolute genius, and one of the most lovely, self-effacing, modest, polite, welcoming, warm people you could ever have the pleasure of spending a day with, and his wife. Anyway, Lineker is large in it, you know, and gets into a conversation with Colin. And Lineker says at the time, he said, I've got 11 million followers on Twitter, right? And Colin, who I think, I can't speak for him, but maybe he had the same kind of impression that I'd got, maybe. he turned around to Lineker and said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Well, I've got 12 million followers on YouTube," right? And it was a great, very deflating sort of moment.
Imagine.
And I scuttled off elsewhere to have a little chuckle because it was a great put down.
Yeah, absolutely right. But it's a good insight into what the man is actually like. I've only run into him a couple of times, and he's always come across as supremely arrogant.
Yeah.
You know, whether people say he's a nice guy or not, which some people do, is not really the issue. And I think the fact that he's made this blunder and made his own career blow up in its face, because he could have gone away from the BBC having served it for more than 25 years, you know, and he's a good presenter, I'm not going to take that away from him, he was a good footballer, but he's just got a God complex. He thinks that he can now tell everybody what they should be thinking. And he would say things like, you know, well, if you can't talk out if you can't see what's happening, you know, then there's something wrong with you. Let's have a look at what he said about making a genuine mistake.
Last week I shared a post here on Instagram that contained an emoji that has awful connotations. Unfortunately, I did not see the emoji. If I had, I would never ever have shared it. The minute I was made aware, I quickly deleted the post and went on to make an apology. I would like once again to say I'm sorry unreservedly for the hurt and upset caused. It was a genuine mistake and oversight, but I should have been more diligent. I know that.
What a load of old cobblers. Oh yeah, I didn't see the giant rat that was on the sides of the at the very top of the tweet that I put out. But when it was pointed out to me that there was a rat there, I immediately took it down. But I waited 3 days before I made an apology about it because I wasn't sure I needed to.
I don't think the Church of England have appointed a new Archbishop of Canterbury yet, have they? Do you think Gary Lineker could throw his hat in the ring?
Of course he could, yeah, absolutely right.
They could hurriedly make him a bishop, couldn't they?
Maybe we should ask for suggestions for his new career.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? Give us some new suggestions for Gary Lineker's new career. We'll play some more of Lineker out throughout the day because I think we should humiliate this man as much as possible. Sorry, we'll be back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 6:38. Peter Bleksley is here. Good morning, says Jules in Camden. Mike and Peter. The landmark Starmer talks about is the Tower of London, and he should be sent to Traitor's Gate. And Sharon from Staffordshire says, morning, Mike and Peter. Starmer just keeps continuing to ruin our country. What the hell does he keep doing? And does he actually know or care about British people? Well, I don't think he does. One from Scottish who says, morning, Mike. Surely this man can't last till the summer. Could you even go as far as to say he's a dictator? Hate for Starmer is off the scale. Have a great day. I mean, that is one thing that you cannot change about the way the people of this country think. You know, we're a very forgiving nation. We're a very tolerant nation. But when we see somebody like Keir Starmer absolutely ripping it out of us, you know, we are not happy. And people really do dislike him. He is the most hated Prime Minister, I think, in my lifetime that I can remember. I don't remember anybody having these feelings, even about Margaret Thatcher. when she was in.
And he does it all in such a robotic way.
Yes.
Because I'm really quite astounded. But there seems to be... What lacks from Starmer is warmth, compassion, likability.
Yes.
Those kind of things when you meet someone... you might...
like human traits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he does literally seem to be like a robot.
Yeah.
Completely, the way he speaks, the way he acts, his lack of emotion.
Yeah. And also the way
bizarre.
he kind of interacts with people as well. You know, you see him when he's with people that he clearly feels comfortable with. He's got this kind of strange smile on his face, like he's on drugs or something, right? And then when he's with people who he can't stand or who he doesn't feel comfortable with, he looks really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and abrasive.
And abrasive.
Yeah.
And you saw him last week in Prime Minister's Questions when he was asked a question by that woman from Plaid Cymru, and he was really rude to her. He can't stand being questioned on things that he doesn't think he should be questioned on. But a bit like Gary Lineker.
Well, and again, you see, Starmer has spent so much of his working life being in charge.
Yeah.
You know, in charge of the CPS when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. You know, in charge of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
In charge of the country. Oh, I don't believe I just said that.
Yeah.
But he is.
Yeah.
And maybe he's done that in a style...
Let me misquote somebody else by saying he's in office, but he's not in power. Because he's basically any power that he did have, which wasn't much, he's now given away. So he is technically in charge of the UK, but actually he's now no longer in charge of anything.
And all the polls show that he's absolutely tanking.
Yeah.
In terms of
his approval ratings,
popularity,
through the
ratings,
floor. Absolutely through the floor.
Yeah.
Helen says, new career for Gary Lineker. How about Bin Man? He likes rats, talks garbage. Perfect. Morning, Mike and Peter. Lineker's a shoo-in for a new rat catcher in our village, says Peter in Suffolk. And Luke says, Gary Lineker, congratulations on your new job of the Chief Constable of the International Thought Police. What a self-obsessed moron that guy really is. Shall we have a little crack at him? Here he is talking about working at the BBC.
It's been a pleasure and a huge privilege working with the BBC for 30 years.
We'll come back to that. It's been a huge privilege working for the BBC for 30 years. Well, it's a shame that it ended like this, and like I say, he's going to lose close to £1 million because he gets no payoff, which tells you that it wasn't about him quitting. It was about the BBC going, thanks, mate, but would you mind leaving now?
Do you think he'll get a carriage clock?
He might do.
Do you think they'll gather round and have a little leaving do for him?
And maybe a cake.
Tim Davie and his trainers and suits, say a few words.
It seems to me that the people who work at the BBC say that whenever there's somebody who's a big star, like Hugh Edwards, like Gary Lineker, and various others that you can mention, the minions are not allowed to talk to them. You know, they swan in, they swan out. It's not like coming to work here where everybody just mucks in and, you know, people ask you if you want a cup of tea, and if you don't, you want to make one for somebody else. It's not like that at the BBC. The BBC, you're told to leave these people alone in case you bother them, you know, and that's, I think, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and perhaps the root of some of the problems that they've had with so many high-profile people that have been put on a pedestal.
I think that's right. Should we talk about the royal family? A couple of stories this morning to mention. Apparently, David Beckham, on the front page of The Sun, is very keen on his new friendship with King Charles. It turns out they met each other at the Chelsea Flower Show yesterday, and King Charles said, "Did you like the present I sent you?" And he went, "Yes, it was absolutely fantastic." I'm not quite sure what it is. It might have been a bunch of flowers. Or something else for Beck's 50th birthday.
Hats off to David Beckham because he's wearing a delightful buttonhole.
He is.
Which is a rose apparently grown for the king.
Yeah.
As you may recall, I'm rather partial to wearing a buttonhole.
You are?
I usually
I
get
was going to ask you, actually,
garden.
what your view is of him now wearing a double-breasted jacket. It's a very 80s thing, though. I used to have a lot of double-breasted suits in the 80s.
Yeah.
Particularly, I was keen on Hugo Boss double-breasted suits.
Yeah.
And I dread to think what they look like if I look back now. Luckily, there's not much pictorial evidence, but he's wearing a double-breasted suit.
Now, I like a double-breasted suit, and I did own them in the past, but middle-age spread means that I cannot any longer wear a double-breasted suit.
Okay.
You can only wear it, I think, if you are reasonably slender. If you've got a beer belly like me, don't get a double-breasted suit. It just accentuates it.
I just wondered if they're coming back. You know, I don't pretend to have my eye on the world of fashion.
Well, they never went away for people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, did they?
Well, he looks good in one, I have to say. He does look good in one. And then the other story, of course, is the lovely Meghan from Montecito, California, the woman who would like to keep her private life private. You might remember the We Want Privacy stuff on South Park. It looks as though now she's practically willing to put anything out there that will make a bit of money. Her entire sort of photo collection of her 7-year wedding to Prince Harry has been posted on Instagram, a pinboard feature where there's basically an extraordinary photo montage featuring treasured and at times highly personal family pictures charting their love story, including pictures of Harry gazing at one of his babies, the siblings Archie kissing Lilibet, all manner of sort of, you know, what you might call very personal sharings.
Deeply personal moments.
Deeply personal, which is all very well, as long as you don't mind people invading your privacy.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But they do love to have a whinge about that.
They do.
I think it's called having your cake and eating it.
That's it, yes.
Now, of course, Harry and Meghan met in 2016.
Yeah.
The year of the Brexit referendum.
Indeed. So they did.
So I've got a question for you, Mike, if I may. I know it's not really the way that things should operate on this show.
Yes.
But please forgive me.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what do you think has gone best in the last 9 years?
Right.
Their relationship or the Brexit referendum?
I think you can draw some parallels, actually, to be honest, because, you know, Brexit was a great idea at the time, as was probably their meeting and romance and getting married. Great idea. Then, you know, things got in the way of it, really. And it didn't always work out for the best, you know. After a couple of years, suddenly things turned a bit sour. And they had to move out.
And there's been a lot of wrangling. A lot of people have fallen out over it.
A lot of negotiating. You know, lots of regret from people, I think. And, and of course they called it, didn't they? Megxit, when it happened. So there was even that kind of, you know, similarity.
Indeed they did.
And so you've made a great point. I mean, it's very clear to me that our relationship with the European Union is about as bad as their relationship is with each other now, isn't it?
And the public.
Yeah.
Don't forget the public.
The public hate them as much as they hate the European Union. You know, what can we say? Extraordinary.
Have we hit on something here?
Yeah, I think we have. New role for Gary Lineker, says Andy, Starmer's social media advisor for minorities and anti-Semitism. Andy and Pamberan Hans. How about this one from Tony? I'm fuming with this guy Starmer. He doesn't even deserve the nicknames we've given him anymore. What a state of affairs will this country be in after another 4 years of this disgusting, treasonous relationship? It's about time King Charles stepped in and forced this guy out. Maybe send him to Rwanda, says Tony in Stoke-on-Trent. I mean, it is extraordinary how Starmer has managed to mess everything up that he's touched. Right?
Yes, and very extraordinary. I know somebody's been charged and there's an ongoing investigation, so I'm only going to touch on it briefly. But yeah, these fire attacks on 2 properties linked to him and a vehicle that he used to own. We'll have to wait and see, of course. We'll let justice run its course. But there's a lot of unanswered questions, I think, out there, and the public are saying to themselves, what's this about, and what's that about, and is there any relevance and the such like? Maybe it will all come out in the wash.
And you know what was interesting yesterday? Because you know he loves putting out a social media clip, doesn't he, old Starmer? And he completely gets it wrong. And if you ever read any of the comments underneath, they're all anti-Starmer. He put out a clip yesterday of himself talking about, you know, fixing the foundations and resetting the agenda with Europe and all of that. And all of the pictures were of him wearing a blue tie, right? And there was one sort of scene after another. And there was only one scene where he wasn't wearing a blue tie. And it was the scene where he was walking with his wife into Downing Street, where he's wearing a red tie. I.e., he couldn't film anything current with his wife, who presumably was not available for filming. I don't know why. I simply put it out there and asked the question. I'll retweet it so that you can have a look. But it's a very weird sort of what I would regard as social media post. It just seems to me.
Continuity is kind of important, isn't it?
It sort
Otherwise,
of is.
people pick up on things and go, "Oh, isn't that a bit strange?"
Yeah.
And then it just fuels the fire of mystery and intrigue.
Exactly right. Which we don't want to do here at the Home of Common Sense. We just want to talk about the news. It's 6:48.
Oh, yay, we're going to get a little bit more access for British artists touring Europe. Yay. And apparently we're going to get access to use e-gates when we travel to EU countries, which, by the way, all EU countries have been entitled to already, which is why sometimes you arrive at a country, you can use the e-gate, and sometimes you can't. And it's entirely up to them now, and even under this deal, it'll still be entirely up to those member states. So what on earth have we got back for basically surrendering yet another benefit of Brexit?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:51. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course, for a glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. A few other stories to mention. Bank holiday weekend coming up, of course. It's the second bank holiday in May, so some people will be having some time off. Apparently, despite the lovely weather we're having, it's going to be raining on bank holiday, so if you've got any plans to go and spend some time on Skegness Beach or anything like that, I'm afraid you might want to take your sou'wester and a couple of umbrellas and wind cheaters and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about some of the other stories that are going on. Apparently, Kneecap, remember that ghastly pop band?
Must I?
From Northern Ireland, who have been singing about Hamas and Hezbollah and urging
Kill
people
your
to
MP.
kill your MPs. Apparently, they're all upset now because lots of people in the music business have said these scumbags should not be going to Glastonbury. They shouldn't be playing at festivals. They're now threatening to sue people who are trying to stop them making a living. Poor diddums.
Yes.
Isn't that a shame?
Yes, I think, well, they must have plenty of money if they're going to start suing people left, right and centre.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Yeah, exactly right.
You know, there are, of course, limits to what people should and shouldn't say. And I love free speech. I think it's absolutely central to our being as a nation.
Absolutely right.
People tragically feel that it's being eroded, and it might be even further under the upcoming Employment Rights Bill, which is going through Parliament. We'll have to keep a very, very close eye on that. But as things stand, we are free to speak as long as we don't break the law.
Well, I think the point is that people misunderstand when people sometimes are critical. For example, when I was critical of what Gary Lineker had said, people are like, "Oh, I thought you liked free speech." I'm very, very happy for Gary Lineker to say what he says, but he must face the consequences of what he says, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, I put out a joke on social media last week, which upset a number of people. It was a joke, and it also happened to be really funny.
Yes, I remember it.
And certain people took huge umbrage with that. Well, you know, so be it. When I go on, I get trolled quite a lot on social media. You know,
surprise me
from time to time. Yeah. And I like a lot of the trolling. Posts.
Absolutely.
Because some
of them are quite funny.
What I'm saying is I don't like people calling me all the various names they might call me.
Or wishing you dead or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a bit harsh.
Yeah, but I like the fact that people have the right to go on there.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite entertaining, and I like it because if I've got under their skin that they actually want to get hold of their phone and call me a rude name, then I actually like that. So
I got a guy yesterday when I put out the thing about Starmer and his weird tie scenario. Some guy comes on to me who is obviously trying to make out that, because one of the sort of theories about me is that I'm this lonely old git that nobody loves and that I've got no wife and my children hate me and all of that, you know, the usual stuff. And he goes, "What sort of tie do you normally wear when you're with your wife?" Expecting me to say, "I haven't got a wife." And I just said, "A black one usually," you know. And it was just a funny moment, right? And so all of that stuff that you do on social media should be treated like that. It should be funny. All these people who get themselves worked up into an absolute tizzy of madness and violence are idiots, you know?
Yeah.
Calm the hell down.
Yeah, keep melting snowflakes, that's what I say.
Absolutely right. Now, I've got to ask you about this story, Sun, page 17, because it involves the police. They've tasered a 92-year-old man. Now, I don't care what the 92-year-old man may or may not have said or may not have threatened to do, but he's 92. He appears to be sitting in a chair. I think we've got the clip. I'm not sure. Is there audio on the clip? All right, well, let's have a quick look at it. He's in a care home, this guy, right? The police have gone to see him.
On the floor. Pop it on the floor. Donald, pop it on the floor. That's enough, as many as we need. Put the knife on the floor now, or you'll be sprayed. Do your toes. Put it down. Put it down. Donald, put it down.
Seriously?
Last chance.
Can you hold that door? I can't get a good angle.
Donald, put it down. Put it down now. Come on.
Last chance.
Right, put it down. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Put it on the floor.
Do it now. Drop the knife.
Donald, drop the knife.
Donald.
Put it down. Put it down.
Taser, taser.
I mean, I'm sorry, but if a police officer and his assistant police officer can't take a knife off a 92-year-old man without harming themselves, what's going on?
Those officers are currently standing trial for actual bodily harm.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be extremely cautious around what I say about this, because I wouldn't want to jeopardise those proceedings.
Yeah.
Clearly, this is an elderly man who clearly is in possession of a knife.
Yeah.
He's an amputee. He's sitting down.
Yeah.
The police officers have these days, as so often is the case, various resources at their disposal. A parva spray, which is supposed to be an incapacitant spray.
Yeah. So they try that on him.
A taser and all of that. I have had both my stepdad and my dad at that kind of age in care homes. I'm going to let justice run its course and see what the outcome of this trial is, although from that clip, which was released yesterday and has formed part of the evidence of the trial, it's not a great look, is it?
It's not. It really isn't. And I mean, we can leave it there because, as you say, there are, some proceedings which are active. But,
indeed.
But yeah, I mean, you'd like to think that something could have been done before that had to happen.
We weren't there, and I guess the jury will hear all the evidence and deliver their verdicts accordingly.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, on page 31 of the Mail, an Albanian asylum seeker who tried to claim the right to stay in Britain because he was gay has had his case thrown out. We'll call this Migrant of the Day. And he's had his case thrown out because it turns out he failed to reveal he's now married to a woman.
Yeah, because at his original hearing, he claimed that he was gay.
Yeah.
So this is a bit like you and me having a snog now,
right,
and then me running over to my wife and jumping into bed with her. You know what I mean?
That would be a bit unusual.
Yeah, you can't have an each-way
when
bet
you're running
now.
for Parliament.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
I mean, what a nonsense. Unfortunately, it's a good news story because the judge has seen through the nonsense.
Finally,
of it.
somebody's getting deported.
I think this is deeply, deeply insulting to gay people.
Yes.
For him to have gone to court and said, look, I'm a gay man, and then he goes off and marries a woman, lives with her as man and wife, and the judge has seen through it.
Right.
So I think in that regard, it's a very good story. What he should have done is said that his kid didn't like foreign chicken nuggets and then he'd been able to stay in the UK forever and a day.
Exactly.
And probably been eligible for billions of pounds of benefits.
And here's another one that will surprise you. It was at Canterbury Crown Court yesterday. A bloke by the name of Mossab Abdul Karim Al-Gassas, also known as somebody else. He's got a name as Wadi as well.
Yeah.
Apparently, he's pleaded guilty to attempting to enter the UK without leave or valid entry clearance as he came here on a dinghy. Why are we not putting them all to court then? And sending them all back?
The big question of the day, which the government needs to answer.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't got time to get into this too much, but we'll get into it a little bit more, I'm sure, throughout the course of the show. Peter Bleksley, a pleasure to see you, as ever. Thank you very much indeed. I can't believe that hour went so quickly. Coming up, we've got more to talk about. The massive, massive surrender, the massive Brexit betrayal, the massive turncoat that is Keir Starmer. What is he doing? What has he done? And what's he about to do? This is Morning Glory. We'll come back to you after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 3 minutes past 7, and it is a new day, it's a new dawn, and I'm afraid to say that yesterday Keir Starmer committed what can only be described as the greatest act of betrayal of this nation that we have seen, I would say, this century. Plenty of people are up in arms about it. We'll be talking to Priti Patel later on in the show. Steve Baker's going to join us as well, and also, of course, we'll be talking to Sarah Poachin from the Reform Party as well, the newest MP there for Runcorn, which, of course, was a by-election win for her just a couple of weeks ago. We'll find out what the nation thinks. I think we're pretty clear about what the nation thinks, because at the end of the day, people are so disappointed. They're hopping mad. They are incandescent with rage. I would say if you had a rage-ometer, it would be going because people are literally crazed with absolute and utter insanity because Keir Starmer has sold the firm. He's basically taken to the streets and said, anything you've got, bring it out now. I'm going to hand it all over to Ursula von der Leyen. How about you got a car there? Yeah, let's give that to her. What about some fishing rods? Yeah, give those to her. Anything else you got? Yeah, empty out your pockets. Just give it all to them. We don't need it. We're not going to get anything in return. The Sun front page this morning, done up like a kipper. Starmer agrees to take rules from Brussels, bow down to EU judges, pay billions for the privilege, throw open our borders, let the French plunder our fish for 12 years, and in return, what will we get? 0.3% growth by 2040. What an absolute crock of nonsense. Let's get a voice note from Andy.
Morning, Mike. Morning, Peter. I'm Keir Starmer. How can anyone believe a word that man says? I mean, I know we say this all the time, but he continuously backtracks, moves the goalposts. He's an absolute charlatan, absolutely full of it, and he's an absolute traitor to our country, I think. On another note, just wishing Lucy Connolly all the best today. I hope she gets justice that she deserves and she's released so she can be reunited with her family.
Yeah, Lucy Connolly also hoping to find out today if she's going to get her sentence commuted. She's already been in prison for about 10 months. She's got another 21 months to go. Hopefully somebody in the courts of justice will see sense and let her go home to her family, because enough, ladies and gentlemen, is enough. Kate from Cheshire says, Mike, is Gibraltar the next sellout of this treacherous Prime Minister? Well, we don't know, but we'll ask Sir Bill Cash, because he's coming on the show, of course, as well. What on earth was the point of voting in a referendum in 2016 to leave the European Union if Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of this country, elected on a tiny, tiny number of votes, 20% of the vote of this country, can just take us back into it effectively without even having to ask Parliament? There's something very, very wrong going on, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Dennis in Manchester says, good morning, Mike. The only surprising thing about the press junket yesterday with St Keir of Strasbourg was that it wasn't held entirely in French. That and his EU masters were nice enough not to make him speak on his knees with Miss von der Leyen's foot on his neck. Great show. Yeah, well, absolutely right. Plenty of people have been very, very uncomplimentary, shall we say, about him. Boris Johnson, in particular, was very, very uncomplimentary about him. We'll tell you what Boris Johnson had to say about him in a moment. Let's talk, though, first to Ryan Sabey, Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, and also, of course, a man who's been following this entire story ever since the beginning. When Keir Starmer got in, Ryan, very good morning to you. When Keir Starmer got in July of last year, there was no real indication that this was going to happen, was there?
Not particularly, but then towards the end of last year, we got the we found out that there'd be this big EU summit, and there wasn't too much detail around that. And as we've moved closer and closer to yesterday, it seems like the closer and closer we've got to some sort of capitulation or some kind of surrender, and we got the full results of that yesterday. But should we be surprised? Look at Sir Keir Starmer when he was in opposition, very much talking up a second referendum and how to get back into Europe. So on that front, we perhaps shouldn't be surprised. But when we look at the detail of it yesterday, you can see why there's a lot of anger out there.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, I've not seen so much anger since the Labour government actually announced that they were going to get rid of the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. That's how bad it is out there. And Boris Johnson, for Boris Johnson yesterday to come out and say this, two-tier Keir is the orange ball-chewing manacled gimp of Brussels. He has sacrificed UK fishing interests, handing over our seas to be plundered again, when under the current Brexit agreement we are on the point of taking back full legal control. I mean, that's some pretty heavy language even for these people in Parliament who generally speaking will throw the odd barb at one another. I mean, but that is serious insult, isn't it?
Yeah, but Boris Johnson, well known for his colourful language, but if you read that, it wasn't just a 2 or 3 sentence comment. No. It was several hundred words going through that EU-UK summit deal that we had from yesterday. And I think you take one thing there, just looking at the fishing rights. Yeah. The deal was due to end next year. Many people thought the EU quotas would actually reduce, perhaps would gain a bit more control of those EU quotas and actually gain a little bit more control of our fishing waters. But no, we've signed away those rights on a status quo basis, but for another 12 years. So you wonder, why wasn't it for a shorter period of time? There was talk that we only it was only meant to be for 4, but we've ended up giving it away for 12. So big questions to answer, and you can feel that anger not only from your viewers, but from the fishing community yesterday. They've been talking about it being an absolute horror show and the impact that it will make on their sector.
And, of course, the people who are in favour of this, who are basically all the people who voted to remain, the blob of civil servants who wanted it to stay in the first place and they didn't want us to leave, the international companies, many of the big international businesses who have sort of backed it, they're all saying this is not really a return to the European Union. This is just a reset of the Brexit deal that wasn't properly done by the Tories. And when they talk about, and I was watching Darren Jones last night doing the rounds and talking about how food prices are going to come down, we're going to have access to more trade with the European Union. I mean, how much of that is actually true? I mean, I'll be asking this question to all the guests that I'm going to have on today. I mean, I don't see how anything is going to get cheaper. I don't see how Europe particularly wants many of our foodstuffs. You know, they may want some Scotch whisky, they may want some gin. I don't think they're particularly interested in our sausages. You know, my feeling is basically that they're overselling it to us to try and make out that they've done something brilliant.
You look at two things on this deal. First thing, how much money are we actually going to pay in for the access to all these European schemes? At the moment, it's completely unknown, likely to reach into the billions over time. And then you look at the statement that Sir Keir Starmer made yesterday and the detail that came out from Downing Street. What they actually said, that there'd be a boost to the economy of £9 billion. Well, this is by 2040. When you actually break it down, this works out at 0.2, 0.3%. So the gains are actually marginal for what you've actually given away. So that's why I think there is that frustration there.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so what we're being sold here, to be honest, is a bit of a pup, because an awful lot of the future of our dealings with the European Union is sort of yet to be decided, it seems to me, in the same way that the future dealings between the US and this country are also yet to be decided. And we haven't talked much about the effect that this closer alignment with the EU will have on any future trading deals with Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's the problem. By signing up so closely on whether it's agri-foods, effectively joining like a single market, or when it comes to that, have we tied our hands? Have we bound our hands to actually doing trade deals elsewhere? And there's big questions remain over youth mobility. Yes. Because yesterday we're talking about a cap. We don't yet know what number that is. And also there's talk coming out of Brussels that people actually want to bring, maybe they want people to be able to bring their dependents to this country. So then you have the whole question of this being freedom of movement by the back door. And this is not particularly a youth mobility scheme. We're not talking about under 18s or those from university age. What we're talking about is the under 35s. That seems to go well and beyond the actual definition of the word youth. And also just a quick one on the defence system. Look, we're going to have to be paying into this defence fund to actually be able to try and secure contracts. But again, we don't know how much money we're going to be paying in. All that has to be ironed out. So there's so many questions that have been brought up from yesterday.
And for me, one of the most important things that we have given up and that Starmer has sold out to this country, to Europe, is the rule-taking. You know, in The Sun today, pages 8 and 9, so-called dynamic alignment, Britain will now have to follow the EU rules on energy, food safety and farming. And we saw, for example, already the trouble that farming has got themselves into in France, in the Netherlands. You know, there's been massive demonstrations of farmers there because of what they're trying to do with regard to net zero, to try to kind of, you know, make it more difficult for farmers to use some of the petrochemicals that they use, make it difficult for them to use some of the fertiliser that they use. We've also got problems, of course, with energy because of this energy summit that they held in the UK, which again, all about net zero.
Yeah, and when we voted to leave, we wanted to be the rule makers. When you look at this deal yesterday, it looks like we're going to be the rule takers. Yeah. And on top of all of those issues that you mentioned, whether it's trade or emissions, one of the big things that will come into this is the European Court of Justice and them having more say over what happens here. So that's why I think you're going to have so many attacks this over the coming days from the likes of Reform or the Conservatives on this deal. It puts Sir Keir in a pretty difficult position, and I think he's certainly under a bit of pressure when it comes to this subject because people just feel so betrayed.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. A lot of people said to me yesterday when this first happened, because, of course, the leaks started to come, did they not, yesterday morning out of the EU camp, because I was talking to Harry Cole, your colleague, yesterday, and he said that, you know, these leaks are not coming from Downing Street because Downing Street hasn't got much to crow about. The leaks started to come out from the EU camp. But people were saying to me yesterday, how can we have had a referendum in 2016 to leave the European Union only for Keir Starmer to effectively take us back into it, ignoring all of the things that the public of this country voted to leave behind?
Yeah, no, exactly. And those leaks were coming out yesterday morning. And as you say, Britain didn't have much to crow about on this. If the big sort of the first sort of policy that was coming out yesterday morning was the fact that we'd given away these fishing waters for a further 12 years, and that just created the bad the bad mood about the whole deal. So I think that the fishing is a bad thing, but also one of the sort of key things ministers were talking up yesterday was how people can actually go on holiday and go through the e-gates quicker when they actually get to their destination. Well, this is not an automatic given right. The individual countries will have to sign this off themselves.
Yes.
So there was a lot of crowing about this yesterday, saying, isn't it wonderful? And if it works, of course. But the trouble is, I think there's a lot of legal complexities, and I'd be absolutely amazed if this is in place before the start of the school summer holidays at the end of July.
But also, it seems to me as well that the way that the story unfolded was yesterday morning, they tried to sort of catch up with the leaks about the fishing by saying, you know, this is basically, you know, our new beginning. It's a new era that we're having with the European Union. You know, we've set out our stall. It's going to be great. When they realised that people were not happy with that because it actually effectively meant that Brexit had been cancelled, they suddenly changed the narrative. So by the evening, by the time I was watching politicians in the evening, they were saying, oh, we're just finishing off the job that Boris Johnson didn't do. You know, this is just a deal for Brexit after Brexit, which wasn't done properly by preceding Conservative governments. But I don't think people are going to buy that either.
No. What we had yesterday was his warm words from Sir Keir Starmer talking about a new era. We had Ursula von der Leyen talking about, you know, turning the page. But ultimately, when Britain is handing over more powers to European judges, paying billions of pounds into the EU budget, we're giving away more rights to our fishing rights for longer. You know, lots of people will see this as a surrender deal from Britain. There's talk of some of the supermarkets this morning saying this is helpful for them. But when the actual trade benefits are so small over such a long period of time, this is a very, very difficult sell for Sir Keir Starmer when it comes to, especially to those people who voted leave back in that referendum.
Yeah, absolutely right. Which was a massive change in the way that people in this country wanted to be governed. Ryan, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Deputy Political Editor at The Sun. Let's talk to Sir Bill Cash, former Conservative MP, of course, and a Eurosceptic of old, a man that will be, I presume, absolutely appalled by what happened yesterday. Sir Bill, very good morning to you.
Morning to you too.
I find it astonishing, and as many of my listeners and viewers do, that we could have a referendum 9 years ago which completely sort of uncoupled us from all of this nonsense, only for Keir Starmer, with the sort of snap of his fingers, to be bringing us all back into it. I mean, it seems extraordinary. People have said to me, how is it possible that he can do any of this without even referring to Parliament?
Absolutely, and if I may say, I agree with every word that your previous speaker has said. I also agree with your sentiments, the way you've expressed it as well. It's really serious, this. Did anybody notice that the European Scrutiny Committee, of which I was chairman for 14 years, and I was on the committee for 40 years, was abolished by the Labour Party as soon as they got into office in a one-line motion without even a debate.
Yeah.
Now, what that meant was there was no select committee looking at this European issue, nobody having the opportunity to dig into the basis on which all this was being done. It was done in complete secrecy. It was suddenly bounced on people. It's a total betrayal. And apart from, remember the days when our fishermen used to have to throw the fish overboard in order to be able to comply with these stupid rules the Labour Party that the European Union imposed on us. They're now throwing the fishermen overboard as well.
Yeah.
It's absolutely shocking, and it's a complete betrayal, total surrender. I agree with every word that's just been said, and I think you're going to have an awful lot of other people as angry as I am and as angry as they were. I fought 40 years to get the sovereignty of this country, and we got it eventually in the Withdrawal Agreement Act. There is a guarantee in that act. It's called Section 38, and it guarantees the sovereignty of the United Kingdom in an Act of Parliament. And not a single person from the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrats, nobody actually they didn't dare vote against it when we got that act through in 2020. It gives us complete sovereignty. We are now being subjected again to the European Court of Justice, and basically this is a total betrayal. And I think everybody has to get as angry as possible so that people can really get the message across to the government. We won't put up with this.
No, quite. And as far as you're aware, and you may not be able to answer this, is there any legal recourse as a result of that Sovereignty Act that we could somehow find our way to a court with?
Well, it's a completely clear provision in the Act of Parliament. It's called Section 38, and it actually says that British Parliament is sovereign, and notwithstanding, in other words, despite any statement or arguments or anything that's written down in the European Union, we override the whole of the European Union arrangements, and basically it's completely and totally unassailable. So I think people should be thinking very hard about how and to what extent they can do this, and I hope that in Parliament, as we had on Monday last week, this last week, where I was referencing a lot of my chums by text and so on and so forth, and even the Labour Party said Bill Cash is obviously back again because he knew that I was on the warpath last Monday, but it's going to continue. I'm not stopping here. This has got to be an absolutely massive campaign to stop this nonsense. And did anybody ever ask Van der Leyen or anybody else, is the European Union still seeking to become a political union? Ask her that question. She will say, yes, we are, because it's locked into their legal arrangements. The whole of this European issue has always been about imposing laws, subjugating us by qualified majority vote, behind closed doors, and without even a transcript. Our voters are being taken for a complete betrayal and a complete ride. It's absolutely shocking, and everything that Starmer says is he's like a sand eel. He darts around, changing his mind every 5 minutes. Actually, this is a sellout on a massive scale, much bigger than people appreciate, and the proof of the pudding will be in the eating.
I totally agree with you. And ironically as well, it comes at a time when the EU, as far as I could see, was at a pretty low ebb, you know, where you've got, you know, the countries of Europe shifting to the right, many people talking about the possibility of whether the EU is even a going concern. And suddenly Starmer pops up and decides to give them, you know, a huge boost.
Who would want to join up with a failing system? Anyone who's read Wolfgang Munchau, who's one of the greatest commentators on the issue of Europe, said the German miracle is over. He'd written a book called Kaput. It's over. And actually, their growth and their entire arrangements are based on a Ponzi scheme. They entirely fail to generate growth. France, Germany, all the other countries in Europe, it's a Ponzi scheme, and the idea that we should rejoin it in any shape or form or pay any lip service to it at all is absolute nonsense. We've got our self-government back. That's what people fought and died for during the last war. And I think myself it's the most appalling, disgraceful betrayal of British people and of those who died for our freedom. We're going back into a dark age if this continues. We've got to fight for it.
So Bill Cash, great to have you back. We'll be talking to you again soon, I'm very sure of that. So Bill Cash, former Conservative MP, Eurosceptic extraordinaire, a man who says this is a lot worse than you think it is, and it's going to be even more bad for this country if we don't fight it. I think Sir Bill Cash has issued a rallying cry there for everybody who knows that what Keir Starmer has done is absolutely unforgivable. It is a betrayal. It is a surrender. There is no question about it. Let's get a voice note from Gaz.
Morning, Mike. Great show, mate. Gaz from Pontefract. 6 hours in a cab with David Lammy and don't get paid? That's a double whammy. He made a right old mess. Seats covered in food. That's not the way. It's just plain rude. What did he do to kill the time? Stuff his chops with cheese and wine. Read a book. Draw a doodle. Power through a beef pot noodle. He's certainly getting bigger on that there world stage. On the taxpayers' quid, it's all the rage. He's eating us out of home and house. Wouldn't be so bad if he were any use. Get yourself home and do some work. And next time, use the train, you bloody Burke.
Brilliant. Gaz, what a great poem about David Lammy. We have to play that out a bit later on. We'll put it in the book of memories for that, because it's only 7:24 right now. Next, though, we're going to speak to Matt Koker, a Chartered fishing skipper. We spoke to him before this dreadful deal was done. Let's see what he makes of it now. That's coming next on Talk.
Oh, yay, we're going to get a little bit more access for British artists touring Europe, yay. And apparently we're going to get access to use e-gates when we travel to EU countries, which, by the way, all EU countries have been entitled to already, which is why sometimes you arrive at a country, you can use the e-gate, and sometimes you can't. And it's entirely up to them now, and even under this deal, it'll still be entirely up to those member states. So what on earth have we got back for basically surrendering yet another benefit of Brexit?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you until 10 o'clock. Tag says this, time for the country to be heard. We are not happy. And Paul from Westcliff says, Starmer has finally stopped the boats. Unfortunately, they are our own fishing trawlers. What a traitor, he says. Bill Cash says we must all rally round and fight. But how, says Maureen. Well, I'm sure that there will be campaigns that will be started up because people are really, really angry about this. Have I got this right, says Stephen. We've sold our fishermen out so the British population can holiday abroad, take their pets and still eat British sausages returning via an e-gate. I'm spitting tax. Well, exactly right. There is nothing in this deal, it seems to me, is of any use whatsoever to man or beast in this country. You can take your pet with you to your holiday. You could have done it anyway. You know, for people who don't have a house in the other continent, it doesn't really matter. Nobody has ever been held up at an e-gate or trying to get into Spain or Portugal or France or Germany or Italy. I never have. What's the problem? Let's talk to Matt Koker, Chartered Fishing Skipper. We spoke, Matt, a few weeks ago about your fears about what would happen with Starmer and his ties with the European Union. I guess your worst fears have now been realised.
Well, that's correct, Mike. Yes, they have. And quite honestly, I can't believe it's 12 years. I mean, I was maybe thinking possibly 4 at a maximum.
Yeah.
after a 6-year transition period, which, again, that was extreme, really, in itself.
Yeah.
And now to add another 12 years, it's just, this is the death of the UK fishing industry, really. I can't believe he's done it.
Well, that's what Nigel Farage was saying yesterday. I mean, I was watching some politicians, some Labour politicians last night saying, oh, no, you misunderstand, you know, because what we mean by this is that we can make British fishermen able to sell their goods into Europe because, you know, you fish for a lot of things that we don't eat, so therefore you can now sell them into Europe. Is there any truth to any of that?
Well, the only reason there is any barriers and the bureaucracy about selling fish into Europe, this was all put in place by the EU.
Right.
So I can't believe we're in a situation where the EU is putting barriers in place and then saying to them, we can lift them barriers. I mean, these are barriers that have been put in place in the name of health and safety and all these other things,
right.
but if you let us fish in your waters, then all of a sudden that is okay, and we are able to lift them barriers. So it's almost putting things in place to then use as bargaining tools, and we've fallen for it. I can't believe we haven't turned around and said, well, this, you know, we should be arguing about the barriers, not whether they should be having access anymore, because we're not in the EU. They shouldn't be fishing our waters.
No, quite. And presumably because they've given them this 12 years, and by the way, you know, they were only asking for 4. I mean, the idea that Starmer suddenly handed them 12 is ludicrous. Presumably this will embolden the French and the Spanish fishermen so that they'll go even further into the waters and they'll take even more fish out of the waters.
Well, that's right. I mean, they've got no, you know, the thing is there's no incentive for them to preserve the waters. They're not their waters, and they're now being told that they've got a little bit longer. They've got a little bit longer. So, you know, they'll fish it as hard as they possibly can. And there is a reason they want to fish over here. And that's because over on their side, there's very little fish left, you know, and we do fish over their side sometimes, and we used to quite often, but we found we was catching more on the UK coast. Right. So there is a reason they want to come over here, and I can't believe we've fallen for it again.
Yeah.
We're an island of, you know, sort of coastal communities, and we've waited long enough for this to happen.
Yeah.
And again, now it's been extended, and I just feel like this will probably never go away. And in 12 years' time, the way things are going, we might even be back in the EU, and it would have been all for nothing.
Well, exactly right. And, I mean, they also make the argument, don't they, the people who are in favour of this deal, and the Europeans also, say, well, there's not really much fishing business that goes on anymore, you know, there's other businesses which are more important. Well, one of the reasons why there's less fishing business going on in this country is because the EU have killed it off.
Exactly that, yes. I mean, the fishing has been bargained away by, I mean, successive governments, really. It's not just this government, but this is a major blow. I can't believe, after all that he said last year, and people believed him as well, he's just gone completely, done a U-turn and gone back on what he said. And it is very frustrating because we want a chance to rebuild our fishing, and we do manage our waters very well. We've got very strict fisheries. And everything was starting to, you know, look positive. I mean, people were even thinking of investing in it, and these coastal communities need that. And now we're back to square one. We're actually worse than we've ever been, to be quite honest, because when we was in the EU, we was able to fish further off. Now we can't even do that, so we're actually worse off than we've ever been.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what does it mean for you personally, for your particular part of the business? I mean, what will you be able to not do now? And will these sort of, you know, regulations that used to keep our waters, you know, fairly decently protected now disappear?
Well, that's right, they will do. I mean, it's very difficult to impose these regulations when we have quite strict regulations, and it's very difficult to impose these on vessels that are coming into our waters but then leaving at the end of the day or leaving at the end of the week, because the fisheries aren't in their home port. So, I mean, we get the problem where we come back into the harbour and we'll be inspected by the fisheries, and, you know, we've got the fish on board, they'll inspect it all and everything, and I'll say, well, there happens to be a boat out there which is possibly not following the regulations, as we've witnessed, and they'll say, well, where are they going back to? And I'll say, well, they're going back to Boulogne or the Netherlands or something like that, and they'll say, well, there's nothing we can do about it.
Right. And we've actively invited them in.
Exactly that, yeah. I mean, it's so frustrated now, and I can't see how this is going to work. This is going to cause such friction. I mean, if this was the other way round, Calais would be blockaded today. There's no doubt about it. The fishermen would have blockaded the ports. They would be in absolute, you know, they'd be up in arms about this. Yet in the UK, if we do that, the fishermen will be fined, their boats will be, you know, impounded. We can't do that, and we wouldn't want to do that because we don't want to impose this on. We don't want to cause more problems for our own country. We just want our own part of the sea back, and it's only a small amount. It really is.
And is there has any member of the government come to talk to you or come to talk to representatives of your business?
Well, they've said, there's going to be a £360 million fund for the fishing industry.
Right.
That's going to go absolutely nowhere. I mean, split that up over 12 years, and over all the coastal communities, the families, and all the infrastructure that surrounds the fishing industry, which again now is going to have no interest in investment because, you know, I mean, everybody's obviously seen this ruling. It's going to go nowhere. It's a drop in the ocean. I mean, he's basically done what everybody thought he would do, which is make the rich defence companies richer and the poor fishing industry poorer.
Yeah.
So he's not a prime minister for the people. He's a prime minister for big businesses like BAE Systems, which they're not struggling, by the way. They're multi-million-pound companies. It just seems completely unfair again.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. You've been betrayed, I'm afraid to say. Matt, but great to talk to you. Let's keep in touch to see how you get on. Matt Koker, Charter Fishing skipper, saying basically it's the end of British fishing. They can't survive another 12 years of the French and the Spanish and the Dutch and the Belgians coming in and plundering the waters. And what about the so-called environmental damage? You know, we supposedly have pretty good protections in this country against environmental vandalism of the seas. But now the European Union will lift all of that because it's not in their interest anymore. So that's fine, isn't it? Well, it shouldn't be. How is it possible that that is OK? Let's get a voice note from Nick.
Mike, it's Nick Moore from Loughborough. Another thing that yesterday's disgraceful deal exposes is the fact that this government has absolutely no intention of reducing illegal migration, because if they had intended to do that, they could have wrapped up a returns agreement within the deal that they made. Having conceded so much, it's not beyond the wit of man that we could have said, for giving away this much, we expect you to take your illegal migrants back. And that was never discussed. Shows to me that they don't want to reduce illegal migration. Have a good day, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed. Yeah, of course they don't. I mean, if they wanted to reduce illegal migration, they'd have done something by now. They'd have stopped the boats. They would have started arresting people. And we got a story this morning of a guy who's up in court in Canterbury. Some people can be taken to court for landing on these shores illegally. But apparently they can't do that to everyone. Well, why not? This from Tino says the agreement includes financial contributions from the UK for certain benefits, such as reducing checks on food exports. The government has described these as administrative costs rather than payments. And Neil says this, Mike, much is being made of the opportunity for us Brits to use the e-gates. Firstly, this is optional by country. Secondly, at the end of the year, the EU will bring in the ETAS travel scheme, ETAs, which means all travellers outside of the Schengen zone will have to give fingerprints and face recognition. So really, there is no advantage anyway. Well, of course there isn't. I said this yesterday. You're quicker and better off going through the non-EU channel because you get through quicker. Mike, this new negotiation is something like a scene out of the life of Brian. We will offer you a 4-year extension of rights, says Starmer. That's not enough, replied Ursula von der Leyen. All right then, how does 12 years sound, said Starmer, her lips quivering. I mean, it is just nonsensical. It's hard to believe that when you wake up this morning, you don't go, was that some kind of nightmare yesterday? Is it actually not true? I'm sorry to say that it is true. 0344 499 1000. Charles Feldman coming up. And we're going to talk about Trump's phone call yesterday with Vladimir Putin.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:39. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when it's time for Julie Hartley-Brewer. Morning, Mike. It's becoming more and more obvious that two-tier hates making decisions and will pass on responsibility to anyone, hence needing a court to decide what a woman is and giving away Chagos, and now Macron and co can make the rest. He is pathetic, says Ian in Oldham. Mick says, morning, Mike. I agree totally on this latest European claptrap. Sadly, the majority in this country won't stand together in standing up for what we believe. Unfortunately, Mick's in Kent. Which is probably going to suffer more than most about all of this. Let's have a chat now, though, to Charles Feldman, US political commentator, because yesterday, in the midst of all of the madness going on in Europe and all of the crazy deals that were being struck in Downing Street, when I say deals, I mean that term incredibly loosely, and with all of the excitement around Gary Lineker being fired from the BBC, there was also a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Let's have a quick look at what Donald Trump had to say about that.
Well, I want to thank everybody. We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up.
There were quite a lot of conversations being had yesterday. Let's talk to Charles Feldman, US political commentator, and find out what's being said over there. Charles, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
So, the plot thickens, I suppose you might say. With every week comes a new revelation of one kind or another. You can never be quite sure where it's going to go. I mean, Trump in the Middle East last week, doing his businesses, doing his deals, you know, pleasing an awful lot of people, upsetting a few people. So tell us what do you make of what happened with this phone call with Putin?
Well, first of all, you have to love the way President Trump just sort of says that he wants to have this whole thing wrapped up.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's simple, doesn't it? But I just want to wrap up this war going on in Ukraine. But of course, it isn't that simple.
Right.
And phone call, which we don't know that much about. We've heard a little bit about it from President Trump, less about it from the Kremlin. But one of the things that we do know is the phone call did not result in an agreement for a ceasefire. And that was something that President Trump himself only, a couple of weeks ago said was his #1 goal, at least a temporary ceasefire leading to negotiation. That has not happened. What they agreed upon, apparently, was that Ukraine and Russia would start to negotiate toward having an agreement about a ceasefire, after which, presumably, they would then talk about how to actually end the war.
Right. Yeah, I mean, lots of people have pointed out that most of these types of scenarios, which involve two very bitterly opposed sides settling their agreements off the battlefield, it could take a couple of years, couldn't it?
Yes, and of course, you know, the president's critics are taking great joy in pointing out that when he was running this time around for office, he said repeatedly that he would end this conflict, this war between Russia and Ukraine, you know, in one day.
Yeah.
Well, here we are several months into the presidency, and he has let it be known, as has the vice president, J.D. Vance, that if this negotiation, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't lead to not only a ceasefire, but to some sort of a settlement soon, you know, he's indicated many times now that he, the United States, is willing to walk away from this.
Yes, quite. I mean, the thing I find amusing about the critics of Donald Trump who say, but he said he was going to solve it in 24 hours, is they're quite supportive of some politicians like Keir Starmer in this neck of the woods, who tells lies on a regular basis and promises to do things that then turn out not only to be not happening, but to do the complete opposite. For example, he's just taken us back into the European Union, basically, without having any political mandate to do so. So, you know, the pitch, as it were, is not exactly straightforward for everybody.
No, and look, President Trump tends to speak in hyperbole.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And anybody who actually thought that he meant it when he said that he could end this in a day is an idiot.
Exactly.
Because he clearly couldn't. Anyone with half a brain would realize that
Right.
he didn't really mean that. I think what he meant was that he felt that if he were back in the White House, he would have a better chance than, say, Joe Biden
Right.
had in getting this, as he put it, wrapped up quicker than perhaps somebody else. But I don't think he ever believed that he could really solve this in 24 hours.
No, and I think that's a very sensible way to see it, because that is, as you say, that's the way he deals. That's what he does. Just before we let you go, let's ask you about the situation with Biden. The announcement came yesterday that he's suffering from a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. Lots of questions being asked on this side of the Atlantic about the cover-up about Joe Biden's state of health, both mentally and physically. This new book's coming out in which it says that Jill Biden was basically ruling the roost, running the White House. Big piece in the Mail today saying, did the cover-up over Biden's mental decline also conceal the truth about how long he's really been suffering from prostate cancer? And as ever, the sort of the cover-up story is worse than the real story.
Oh, it always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the health issue is becoming somewhat controversial because now I've heard from different doctors. Look, I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak from a medical point of view, but I have heard different doctors say different things about it. Some have said that it is unlikely that he would have such an aggressive cancer, and this is unfortunately a very aggressive form of cancer. It has already spread through his bones.
Right.
Some doctors have said it is unlikely that this would not have been in existence for several years before reaching this state. On the other hand, there are doctors who are saying, well, wait a minute, in the United States at least, once you get to the age of 70, it is not recommended when you have your physicals to have these PSA tests, these tests that test for antigens in the blood that are indicators of prostate cancer.
Right.
So it's possible that since Mr. Biden is well past 70, that he no longer was taking that test and didn't know that he had, prostate cancer perhaps for several years. But on the other hand, it's one of those things that on the one hand, but on the other hand, as president of the United States, usually they get really top-notch medical treatment.
Yeah, of course.
So it seemed to be a little bit odd if, as a president of the United States, his doctors wouldn't have at least every now and then tested him to make sure he didn't have prostate.
That certainly sounds like the more rational scenario to me, but we'll watch with interest as to what the reaction to all of this is over the course of the next few days and weeks. Good to talk to you, Charles. Thanks very much indeed. Let's get a voice note from Lee.
Good morning, Mike. Fantastic show as always. This is Lee from Cornwall. Given the legal information that Bill Cash has just been talking about, I think we need to have a class action, and I'm talking the entire country. Crowdfund, class action, sue the government.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Not a bad idea. I'd certainly be up for that. We should investigate it. We'll get a couple of lawyers on call to see what they have to say about it. We will be talking to Priti Patel coming up. Steve Baker's going to be on the show as well, so we'll get their view on all of that. Coming up next, Dr. Alan Mendoza from the Henry Jackson Society on the Iranian problem.
EU fisheries are all still allowed access, particularly French and Spanish boats, but French, this is the big sticking point for them, into British waters currently anyway. But the idea was going to be gradually going down and down and down over the years, and that would allow the British fishing industry to build back up because of they have exclusive access to our fishing waters. That's kind of done and dusted. Now, Nigel Farage, a Reform UK leader, said if this is true, this is the end of the British fishing industry. I assume that Keir Starmer thinks, if that is the case, that that's a price worth paying.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:50. I'm Mike Graham. Vern in Southampton says, Mike, Starmer was elected for 5 years. You should not be allowed to make any deals that go beyond 2029. And Christina in Spain says, if we can reset Brexit, then it should follow that we can reset the general election. This government should hold their heads in shame for ignoring the good, hard-working British people. Great show. Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society. Not about the Brexit betrayal, although I'm sure he's probably got some things to say about that. But we'll take a little detour away from that just for the moment, because we need to talk about Iran. And Iran, I'm afraid, has become quite a big problem in this day and age. We know, for example, that they back all manner of terror groups in the Middle East, including Hamas, including Hezbollah, including the Houthis. They are basically the people that bankroll and organise an awful lot of what actually happens in terms of the terror that goes on in that part of the world. We've had spies who have been arrested and charged in this country. We've had the Iranian terrorists who wanted to blow up the Israeli embassy here in London. All sorts of current and active cases going on. Alan, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
I guess the question really is, what are we going to do about Iran? Because at the end of the day, we've got, we can't be too specific about these individual cases because there's charges and all sorts of court cases coming up. But it's very clear that there's an awful lot of people arriving here from Iran in various different ways, whether they're coming on small boats or coming, legally, who wish to do us harm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had case after case now when the security services have told us that Iranians have been responsible for failed terror attacks of various kinds. We don't know how some of these people have gotten into the country. We don't know how, what they're doing in the country. It is an extraordinary failure of, number one, border control, and also of not understanding who your enemy is. It was last year that MI5 told us, the Director General told us, that 20 failed Iranian plots have taken place since 2022. Yeah. Extraordinary number. And now we've got potentially another one. It's all very concerning.
It really is. And I mean, who's looking after the store, as it were? I mean, we've watched Labour giving away Britain to the European Union. I mean, who's actually running our defences and who's running our kind of counter-terrorism operation in this country, and why are we not seeing this coming?
Well, this is the thing. Why do we think Iran is in any way, shape and form not an enemy? It's been an enemy for many years. It's wanted our destruction as much as other allies in the Middle East or beyond. There's been a long-standing hatred for Britain in Iran for various reasons. Some, some sort of historically justified, others totally not ideological and sort of pushed forward because that is the hatred of that regime. And in reality, we, have not got tough with Iran from a governmental level. We haven't put the maximum sanctions we could have done. We haven't worked to destabilise the regime, and as a result, they're free to come and attack us.
Yeah, which seems incredibly, loose of us to allow to happen. I mean, surely we should be prescribing Iran at this point as a terrorist nation in terms of the way that we prescribe Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis. These are all terrorist organisations funded by one nation. Surely that nation who funds them should also be prescribed.
Yes, I mean, it's difficult to perhaps legally prescribe a whole nation, but clearly the Islamic well, no one, you can't quite do it in that way. But what you can do very easily, Mike, is prescribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who are the agency in Iran who do all these activities. Right. It's not being run by someone on the street. This is a highly trained organisation that exists to infiltrate into our societies with its foreign, if you like, campaigning. And why we haven't done so, despite this government having pledged to do so in opposition, is beyond me.
Yeah, exactly right. And we see that the Iranian ambassador has been summoned to the Foreign Office, which is, a sort of diplomatic nicety, I suppose, where he gets his knuckles rapped and he gets told that, you really must stop being such a naughty boy. But it's not very effective, is it?
No, Mike, we've got something we could easily do. Number one, as I said, prescribe the IRGC. Say to them, we've had enough of your activities on British soil. You're not going to foment terror and division and hostility on our soil. We are banning this organisation, number one, and making it very difficult to operate. Number two, we should be snapping back sanctions on the nuclear issue. Iran continues to build that nuclear weapon, which would, if it got it, Mike, think how much worse its behaviour would be. So again, we have the option until October this year, time's running out, to snap back those sanctions. Why is the government not doing it?
And one of the few countries that seems to be standing up to Iran and doing so fairly robustly, of course, is Israel.
Well, I mean, look, the issue with Israel is that Iran has attacked Israel twice in the last year with ballistic missiles, right? Hundreds of missiles being fired, which, by the way, in anyone else's book would be a declaration of war. Right. Everyone pretends Iran is sort of different in this regard. But yes, the Israelis are existentially threatened by Iran. We've all been threatened by Iran because all the shipping that, of course, tried to get through the Suez Canal was stopped by the Houthis, who are clients of Iran. So Iran threatens us all and continues to do so. Why we don't take it seriously is a serious mistake.
Yeah, and there was a time, was there not, when there was some suggestion that the sort of the theocracy that's been running Iran for such a long time might be coming to an end. I don't remember why I think that, but I seem to remember that there was a suggestion that there was now sort of opposition parties that thought perhaps being slightly less religiously based might be better. What do we know about what's going on actually inside the country?
Well, it's a very good question. Over time, we've had a lot of false starts, and mainly because, of course, the regime has faced opposition, protests, even rebellion, but it's maintained its military force and capability to put that down. Now, what we do know now is that Iran is hurting, i.e. that the economic mismanagement of these people is epic. The country, this is a country that has massive national, sort of natural resources, and yet it has power cuts the whole time. Right. People are, the economy is stalling, people are worried about the future, and of course you've got this heavy-handed religious police who crack down if a woman isn't wearing a sort of a head covering, and will drag people away, torture them, rape them, do things to them. So it's hated, I think, by ordinary Iranians, and that much is obvious by the fear that the regime has for ordinary Iranians, and economically it's in a disastrous position. So isn't it time to, if you like, really push home that advantage and hope that it will topple if you put more pressure on it? That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely right. Alan, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Coming up in the next hour, we've got Steve Baker, former Conservative MP. We've got Reform MP Sarah Poachin. And, of course, we've got Lord Daniel Hannan, who's written a big piece in The Sun today about the Brexit betrayal that we've just witnessed Keir Starmer operating on the entire nation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Jane says this: I sense civil unrest because everything we wanted is now gone. It's frightening. The only person it pleases is that annoying poster bloke on College Green. Kate says this from Cheshire: Starmer has waited 9 years for this. He knows his future is in Europe. He'll inflict as much damage as he possibly can so that whoever comes in next will fail miserably to fix everything that he's broken. As a staunch Brexiteer, I can't even put into words how betrayed and angry I feel today without ending up in the nick. Well, that's the other thing that we're going to be talking about throughout the day here at Talk, is that Lucy Connolly, the woman who was put in prison for 31 months for a post on Twitter, is up for an appeal today. She made the appeal towards the end of last week. We hope to hear sometime this morning, possibly around about 10:30, whether she will have her sentence commuted. She's done about 10 months in prison already. She's got another 21 months to go. But it's absolutely and utterly imperative, and a lot of people have said this, that she gets released and sent home to the bosom of her family. Kevin in Sheffield says, most MPs tell us they are in politics to make a difference and to make people's lives better. After the treachery of Starmer's deal yesterday, I'm sure he is in power just to punish the great British public. Just when you thought he couldn't do any more to us, he does. this Marxist government needs to go, and it needs to go ASAP. I think that's absolutely right. So much to talk about this morning. We've got Labour, who are going to apparently ban trans women from women-only shortlists. Well, that's the right thing to do, isn't it? Because, of course, they're not women, so they shouldn't be there. Also, Kneecap, that dreadful band, are apparently threatening to sue the music industry for stopping them from playing concerts, even though they urge people to kill their MPs and they show support for the IRA, Hamas and Hezbollah. What on earth is the world coming to? This is Morning Glory, back after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. Lots of you very, very angry this morning about what happened yesterday. Not only did Keir Starmer give away the store, not only did he sell us out to the European Union, not only did he pretend that he was doing it out of the goodness of his heart and that this would actually be better for the British for the British public, but he's actually now trying to make out that he's actually finishing the job that Boris Johnson didn't finish. He's now trying to sell us on the idea that this is how it would have been done by the Conservative Party if they'd done it properly. Nothing can be further from the truth. And just to double check on that one, we're going to be speaking to Steve Baker, former Conservative MP, of course, former minister in the government, a Brexiteer from the beginning, a man who knows everything there is to know about why we left the European Union, why people wanted to leave the European Union, and why we don't want to get back into it. Thank you very much indeed. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Pete says this: is Starmer deliberately trying to start some sort of civil war or unrest by openly destroying our country? Because it certainly looks that way. I've never seen so much anger on this show from you guys out there as I've seen since the Labour government decided to get rid of the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. That was the last time I saw this level of anger, and I think this is actually worse. Morning Mike says, Hev, I woke up early for your show today to listen to the backlash on the EU deal. So we paid £30.2 billion to leave the EU, and we're now paying into the EU again. What the giddy aunt is going on? Starmer is a traitor to this country. And that, I'm afraid, is the takeaway that we've got for you this morning, because I don't know anyone that thinks this is a good deal. There doesn't appear to be any part of the deal that is of any use to man or beast living on these great British Isles. I'm Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. So we've got a big hour this morning. We've got Steve Baker with us. Steve, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, Lord Daniel Hannan, who's written a piece about the big betrayal, and also Sarah Poachin MP, the newest MP for Runcorn for the Reform Party. Steve, this is an unbelievable situation. I mean, yesterday I was almost open-mouthed and speechless, but obviously that's not a good thing if you do what I do, so I wasn't completely speechless. But, you know, when the EU start leaking how great the deal is before the government have even made the announcement, you kind of know where you are, don't you?
Well, yeah, they think it's great because he's sat down on their side of the negotiating table and given them everything they wanted. Like, for example, control over our emissions trading scheme, control over our access to our fisheries.
For 12 years, they were asking for 4.
Yeah, and, well, incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, of course, aligning to their agri-food rules, which, again, they're going to love, to have the UK align without having any say over the rules. So it's a terrible thing, and you know, the seriousness of the comments of your listeners is
they're absolutely fuming.
Well, it's grave, isn't it? But it's like Keir Starmer's an alien trying to work out what life on Earth is like. I mean, I'm afraid it's a real dialogue of the deaf. He just doesn't understand that a decision to leave the EU was a decision to be outside its political and legal jurisdiction.
Yes.
So it's not a tolerable compromise to, like, stick yourself, like, half back in the shower. You know, and that's what he's done with agri-food, and it's really not acceptable.
And he started the negotiations, as you say, on the wrong side of the table, and with a view to just getting back into bed with them effectively, because that's what's happened.
It is what he believes in. So I'm afraid when I lost my seat and we lost power, I'm afraid I did expect this sort of thing.
It was a
Labour.
protest vote massively, right? But I think a lot of people, maybe even some who voted for Labour, are incandescent now because of what's happened. Because this is just the latest, let's face it, ridiculous disaster that Labour have presided over.
This ought to be the end of the Labour Party. If there was any justice, this would be the end of the Labour Party. I mean, throughout my 14 years in Parliament, I saw that the Labour Party in Parliament was completely disconnected from the working people they purported to represent. They have gone on and on and on about niche cultural issues in ways that I know, because I'm from a working class background, that normal working people are not interested in those niche cultural issues. And this is just one more sign that they didn't understand that the world doesn't work for far too many millions of ordinary people. And they wanted change, and that change included making our own laws in our own country. So electric bills are far too high. Well, we know from analysis that going into the EU emissions trading scheme, because they have a higher price on carbon, that's going to put up people's electricity bills. I think I saw a figure of £112 a year on a normal bill.
They're claiming that it's going to come down by about £100 a year, but I mean, I don't know where they're getting these figures from. They're claiming food is going to get cheaper. How?
But what... So much of this deserves fact-checking. The reality is that the EU puts a higher price on carbon. That drives up the electricity price. The reality is that there was food price inflation in the UK over the recent years, but there was higher food price inflation in the European Union. And it's incredible to see actually a lack of fact-checking of what Labour claims.
Well, most media don't care about fact-checking because most media are very happy that we're going back into a better, closer relationship with the European Union. I was watching you on another channel last night. And you could see that the person who was actually supposedly adjudicating your conversation was very keen on being in the European Union, and you can't get away from it. And that's what everybody in this country who's in the media wants to be.
I'm afraid it's a very, very serious cultural split this country's going through, a big reorientation in politics, and we're going to have to be, despite our anger about being sold out, we're going to have to think really carefully about how we communicate with one another, because we're so on a different wavelength. It ought to be easy for anyone to understand we wish to make our own rules in our own country. And you can't compromise on that.
How is that difficult for people to get? I mean, let me ask you this. We spoke to Bill Cash a little bit earlier on, and he's hopping mad as well.
Of course.
And he was saying that, they did away with the European Scrutiny Committee at a stroke as soon as they got in, so there was no scrutiny of any of this likely stuff that was coming up. And I said to him, how is it possible for a nation to vote in a referendum to leave an organisation and then, without another vote, for a subsequent Prime Minister to effectively take us back into it? Because that's what he's done, hasn't he?
Well, so I want to be very careful about this. We are still pursuing the overall trade strategy, which I and others fought for.
Yeah.
So even Labour have had to do a deal with India, with the USA. They're talking about the Gulf Cooperation Council. These are all things which were put in train by my lot, following a strategy which I and others worked extremely hard to make possible and procure. And that is still the UK government's trade strategy. What they've done is taken us partially into the EU. So on agri-food, they've taken us into the single market, but only on agri-food and only on the emissions trading scheme.
But might that just be the beginning?
Well, indeed, it is absolutely a slippery slope, and we know where they want to go.
Right.
But we're in this odd hybrid situation now where we've got a government which doesn't want to go down the path which is now firmly set before it. But what I think I would argue to people is really the point that the points were thrown on the tracks. The UK now is outside the EU and it's not going into the customs union or the single market.
Right.
But we've been given a complete mess now by Starmer. By opting into agri-food, he puts us in breach of our free trade agreements, which require us to have control of our agri-food rules.
Certainly with the US, if not with India.
Yeah, now the BBC have reported that there's some little finessey thing in there to try and get around that requirement.
Yeah.
But it opens us up to being sued by America, by Canada, by the Pacific Rim countries, by Australia,
or
by New
punished
Zealand.
with tariffs from Trump, possibly.
Indeed, so that's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
One of the several things Trump is trying to do is to remove decades worth of non-tariff barriers, that is rules which prevent trade with the USA.
Right.
We are now opting back into just the rules which he objects to.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see whether the USA accepts that or slaps heavy tariffs on
And
us.
I mean, he has been a bit busy lately with the Ukraine situation with the Middle East, you know. But when he wakes up and has a look at Europe, he's going to go, hang on a minute, that's not what we agreed.
Trump is a brute politician. It's like the Eye of Sauron. People do not want to be in his gaze. And we are going to very firmly get back in his gaze shortly when he works out that we're accepting the EU's rules, whatever they may be.
Yes.
Instead of aligning to the US, not to the US, we're not going to align, we'd never align to just take the USA's rules, but they have a way of doing things which allows for variation and mutual recognition.
Right.
And that's the way we should be doing things. Let's be really clear. The problem here is not that food is going to be unsafe to eat in the UK, the European Union or America. Of course it's not. People go on holiday or business and eat the food.
Right.
The problem is that food is sometimes non-compliant. There is today a serious problem of filthy meat coming into the UK from Europe.
Yeah.
That is the problem. The problem is not that we might have marginally different ways of checking that food is safe. And that's why mutual recognition works. That's why the European Union concluded a mutual recognition and equivalence deal on agri-food with New Zealand. And that's where Keir Starmer should have gone. But it would have taken a bit of effort to understand, a bit of resolve that we were going to be an independent country, and a bit of understanding of what the whole thing was about.
Quite.
And of course he lacks all of that.
No, he does, because we spoke to a fisherman earlier who said, you know, up to now there's been restrictions on fishing in certain parts of the fishing waters, the fishing areas, by the European Union on the grounds of sort of health and safety and or environmental concerns. All of that's now been lifted, so they really didn't have any health and safety concerns or environmental concerns. They just wanted to get access to those areas.
Yeah, so France has an extremely strong interest in fishing in the Channel.
Yeah.
And Spain, of course, has a big fishing fleet. Let's be really clear, because I try to rise to the challenge. I've been a minister, I try to rise to the challenge. It's difficult governing a country. In the negotiation, when we left, France had a strong claim for a transition.
Yeah.
Why? Because the French fishing grounds before we joined the EU were larger than they would be after we left the EU.
Yes.
So they had a strong case for a transition.
Because they fished the hell out of them, effectively.
But they had a strong case for access.
Right.
And we might not like it, and 6 years was a tough thing to do, but now that we're in a different position to agree to 12 years of the same terms, it's just ruinous and devastating for fishing. And for somebody like me from Cornwall, you know, Penryn's a bit far west from where I grew up, but it always sticks with me, because Penryn in particular, down there in the west, it's like a rundown coal mining village would be. It's desolated by a lack of fishing. And it's so tragic to see. And those good people down there were looking forward to fishing coming back, and Starmer's taken that hope away from them.
Which is disgraceful. Bill Cash mentioned Article 38, I think he said it was, of a sovereignty bill, in which he said, you know, he's going to try and look at that and use it in some way to say that we must still remain a sovereign nation, that we must not hand over powers to the European Union. Do you think there's anything in that?
Well, of course, there is substantively something in that. Yes, Bill is, of course, generally correct on these matters.
Yes.
And I would, generally in Parliament, I would look to him for advice. The thing I'm afraid Bill perhaps hasn't emphasised there is that Keir Starmer has a very large majority in Parliament.
Yes.
And whatever the law is, Keir Starmer will get whatever vote he wants through the House of Commons. I mean, that is the problem. Labour has effectively got a supermajority, and they can do what they want.
Yeah, unless he messes it up to such an extent that some Labour MPs actually revolt.
Mike, exclusive right here, right now.
Yeah.
If there are any Labour rebels out there who would like some advice on how to organise against their own side, I am available.
Excellent.
I can't even charge them a fee because I'd have to clear it with a COBA, but...
Yeah, well, listen, it's very good to see you, and it's just going to be a story that runs and runs. I mean, this is the other thing that Starmer's got wrong. He said last night, it's time for a new beginning. We don't want to go back to the old arguments about Brexit. Well, guess what? You've literally just put them right in front of us.
Yeah, it's because it's stupid, and not on, stupid thing to do, not on the same wavelength.
Yeah, ridiculous. Steve Baker, good to talk to you. Thank you very much
thanks
indeed.
very much.
This is, of course, the home of common sense. It's 8:15. Coming up, Sarah Poachin's here from Reform.
EU fisheries all still allowed access, particularly French and Spanish boats, but French, this is a big sticking point for them, into British waters currently anyway. But the idea was going to be gradually going down and down and down over the years, and that would allow the British fishing industry to build back up because of they have exclusive access to our fishing waters. That's kind of done and dusted. Now, Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, said if this is true, this is the end of the British fishing industry. I assume that Keir Starmer thinks, if that is the case, that that's a price worth paying.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 18 minutes past 8. This, of course, is the home of common sense. It's one place where you get common sense. There's not a lot of it out there, particularly none of it around yesterday when Keir Starmer was hobnobbing around with his mates from the European Union. He appears to have taken us back into the EU. No matter what he tells you, no matter what he says, he's set up this framework for what can only be described as a massive disaster. I'm delighted to say Sarah Poachin's back. Very good to see you, Sarah.
Morning, Matt.
Thank you very much for popping in. The newly elected MP from Runcorn, of course. This is unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, I don't know where to begin, really.
I know how you feel.
Yeah.
It's like they are feeding us these lines now because everything he does is a betrayal of this country.
Yeah.
And all the people that voted for Brexit, I was very much loud and proud of Brexiteer, are feeling so betrayed this morning. You know, we're listening. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about the disgraceful sellout of the fishermen.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether we're talking about moving closer to the ECJ, the European Court of Justice again.
Yeah.
He brought up that, he made a big fanfare about his immigration white paper a week ago, and there was nothing in it about leaving the ECHR. So legally, he's taking us straight back to close alignment with Europe, which means that our hands are tied on immigration. And not only that, he's opening the borders up with this youth mobility scheme. And as I've said, who calls a youth? A 30-year-old's not a youth. These are young adults.
These, 35-year-old youths. And there's also some suggestion now today that they may even be allowed to bring dependents with them.
Oh, yes.
Right?
And straight into our public services.
Yeah.
So straight into our health service, our GPs, our dentists. And as we know, they'd go to the front of the queue. Not only that, massive problem in my constituency, housing.
Yeah.
They will go straight in to the top of the housing ladder. So everywhere you look, British people are being hit yet again by this government.
Yeah, it's incredible how people said to me yesterday, when they were pretty angry yesterday, even angrier today, now that they've seen some of the detail. They said, how can we have had a referendum in 2016 which we voted to leave an organisation which we believe to be overbearing, overpowering, and in many ways just, filled with red tape, which made life difficult for us in this country, and taking away our sovereignty. How can we vote to leave that and have him effectively take us back in without even a conversation in Parliament, never mind another referendum?
Absolutely. You would think it would be illegal what they're actually doing, because they are literally defying the will of the British people. And I know from talking to people, it doesn't matter who you talk to out there, they feel utterly betrayed, and that's the only word. That's the only word for it. And they're sort of bulldozing this through against the will of the British people. But it doesn't matter which aspect we talk about here. What about this US deal that he's just done? How are the US going to feel about us now tying ourselves in knots again, red tape, back to Europe?
Yeah.
Because we all know how Trump's going to feel about that.
He is. Well, I mean, I said to Steve Baker there that Trump's eyes have been on the Middle East and now they've been on Ukraine. When he starts to turn around and have another look at what we're doing with Europe, he's not going to be happy, I don't think, because when that deal was done, and it's still very much a long way away from being a proper deal.
Yeah.
Very much part of it was you want to be separated from the European Union. You don't want to be part of the European Union.
Yeah.
He's going to hate that.
He's going to hate that, and then there's a whole question mark then about what that actually will mean for us with tariffs.
Yeah.
We know how he behaves, and we know, his sort of knee-jerk reactions. So let's see what that now brings. But again, it shows that this government is going round in circles. To me, it just feels like there's no clear strategy.
No.
So, Keir Starmer was lauding up his Indian deal. Well, we know what a disaster that is for British workers. Total sellout of British workers, because the Indian workers will be so much cheaper.
Yes. And where are they all going to live, by the way? They're coming here for 3 years.
3 years,
right.
Again, a full access to our public services.
Yeah.
So, again, a massive drain. This country is going to be bankrupt by the time this government's out.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem we've got now is, how do we get this government out? They're in for 4 years. They've got this majority. They've got how much damage? We're talking 10 months, and look at the damage that they've done.
I mean, they're wrecking the
4.5
economy.
years.
I mean, we're told that tomorrow the inflation figures are coming out. They're going to be somewhere around 3.3%, which is a jump from 2.6%, which is huge, right? And that's going to wipe out a bunch more businesses, and it's going to make people's lives more expensive again.
Do you know what? Businesses, I don't even think we've seen yet the full repercussions of things like their workers' rights bill. The fact that we can't, businesses can't hire seasonal workers anymore. That we forget so much is happening every day in terms of disastrous policies coming out of this government, that, you know, we've almost forgot to talk about that workers' rights bill, and the minimum wage going up, the national insurance that businesses have to pay now. You know, I mean, they are going to be hit so hard, and we haven't seen yet the repercussions of that policy.
Exactly.
In 10 months, it's just so damaging.
It is. I saw a little piece in the Telegraph yesterday. Toby Young, Lord Young as he is now, is looking at putting an amendment into Angela Rayner's bill about workers' rights, you know, because all this business about, you know, having your left-wing opinions protected by the Equality Act. Apparently, if you've got right-wing opinions, they're not protected by the Equality Act.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't that funny? It's not really very equal, doesn't sound it to me.
Do you know what?
So he's going to try and get that put into the Equality Act. But, you know, it's like, what are we talking about here?
But also, Mike, you know, right-wing opinions, people will say that I'm right-wing. I am just common sense.
Exactly.
You are common sense. That's what we do here. That's what we do at Reform. We talk common sense. And we get labelled right-wing. But even, you know, straightforward talking now is penalised. You know, I mean, this thing about, upsetting people in pubs or, you know, whatever, if you hear something and you can complain. What's going on in this country? This is becoming an absolute state-run country, which, let's face it, we know that's what Keir Starmer wants.
It's what Keir Starmer wants. It's also what Ursula von der Leyen wants. And at the end of the day, you know, they kept referring to her and that other bloke whose name I can't remember as these, you know, world leaders. They're not world leaders.
They're not world leaders.
They were appointed. Unelected, appointed people by not even the countries they represent, appointed by the European Commission, which, as Nigel Farage knows very well, is a complete and utter, you know, undemocratic body.
But also, why do we want to align ourselves with Europe? Their economies are far weaker than ours. You know, they've got, you know, huge problems themselves politically. Why are we aligning ourselves? You know, it took us. It was a huge task to get us out of this, and now we're just aligning ourselves back in, because that is Keir Starmer's agenda.
Exactly right. And also, I said this to Bill Cash, who was on a little bit earlier, who said there might be some kind of legal way that we can challenge this. But I said to him, you know, the EU's at its lowest ebb ever, you know, because countries are voting to the right, generally speaking. They're fed up with this kind of globalist view that Europe can be one big continent. They don't like the migration problems that they've been given to handle. And so, you know, what do? We give them a huge boost by going, don't worry, we'll come and, like, you know, contribute to and also give you loads of money.
Yeah, but look, you know what? Labour is proving in the 10 months it's been in what a disaster. It doesn't have a strategy. It's an absolute disaster. You know, the Tories' 14 years of failure. If you look at the YouGov poll this morning, the Tories have fallen into 4th place.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen that yet.
I just saw it. I haven't had a chance to examine it, but
so
I saw that.
They are now the 4th
This is the
party.
one from Merlin, isn't it?
Well, it was YouGov.
Was it YouGov? Okay.
Yeah, I saw the YouGov. So Reform leading the way.
Yeah.
And again, it's an example. You've just mentioned it across Europe. You know, people are saying enough is enough.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've said that phrase in the 2 weeks I've been here in Parliament, because that reflects the feeling of the country.
Yeah.
Enough is enough, and they know that they've got to vote now for a party that will stand up for their values. And it's the same across Europe.
Yeah.
You know, that is the feeling. And of course, people like Keir Starmer and the Labour Party will write that off as, oh, well, it's a populist party. Well, it's called populist for a reason, because that is the view of the people.
I know. Well, they've tried to reinvent the word populist as if it's a bad word.
Yeah.
You know, what's wrong with being popular?
What's wrong with being populist?
I mean,
exactly.
Starmer, of course, is trying to be the most unpopular man in Britain.
He's doing quite well.
Succeeded.
Yeah, he's doing quite well.
I've got a quick question for you. This has come in saying, apparently the Houses of Parliament are refusing to ban trans women from female laboratories. Campaigners are furious. The Commons say they're waiting for full guidance before making any changes. Why?
Well, absolute nonsense. I tell you what, if I go into a loo and there's a trans...
A bloke in there.
Yeah, a bloke in there. I will be kicking off big time, so bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well done to you, and great. How are you enjoying it so far?
I'm loving
2 weeks?
it. I absolutely love it. There is so much to do.
Yeah.
I'm in the right place at the right time, and I've got a brave voice,
Yeah.
and I will stand up on these issues. And I just feel that the country is desperate for people like me to stand up and represent common sense.
Absolutely right. And also ordinary people. I mean, Keir Starmer could not be, you know...
Further removed
from ordinary people. He just doesn't know how they think. He doesn't know what they want. He doesn't know how they live.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
and that's
ridiculous.
the sort of thing that I can bring to the table.
Yeah, brilliant. Sarah Poachin, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. This is the Home of Common Sense. I'm Mike Graham. Morning Glory back after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:30. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until the witching hour of 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here then. Morning, Mike. One of the things about Traitor Keir's deal is that the carbon tax agreement will prevent any new fossil fuels, fracking, etc., being invested in, as it will break the treaty, says Andy in Cornwall. Well, see, that's an interesting one, isn't it? You don't really know until you read the small print precisely how this is all going to end up. What we can say is that basically it is a massive betrayal of Brexit. It's a massive betrayal for all of those people who voted to leave the European Union back in 2016. What a load of bollocks is what it says in The Sun today on pages 8 and 9. On page 10, Daniel Hannan has written a piece. We've been humiliated by Brussels and we've been made to pay for it too. It is absolutely ridiculous. I can't quite believe what's happening. In fact, with every passing moment that this show goes on, I get more and more worked up about it. The Sun says it's an EU stitch-up. It's codswallop. How's he gotten away with it? Lord Hannan, very good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning to you, Mike. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
So long and thanks for all the fish.
It really is like that, isn't it? And it's extraordinary. I mean, I was watching the way that the Labour government was trying to manoeuvre the public's view on this, right? Because it started off yesterday with them saying, "Oh, you know, we think we're close to a deal." Then suddenly the EU leaked the fact that they'd done the fishing deal for 12 years, and then they started sort of saying, "Oh, this is our new reset. It's going to be a great new way of dealing with the European Union." And when they worked out that everybody thought that was absolutely a crock of nonsense and didn't believe it, they then sort of later in the day turned to making out that, "Oh, this is us finishing off what the Tories didn't do." Yeah. I mean, it's neither of those things, is it?
No, I mean, one way of measuring it is what were the two sides looking for going into the talks, right? The EU was looking for a British defence commitment to take up the slack where Donald Trump has left off. Yeah. They were looking for free movement for young people so they can export some of their young unemployed to the UK. Yeah. And in particular, the thing they really care about in Brussels is having cheap university places subsidised by us for their own kids, for the Eurocrats' kids, for the Nepo babies of Brussels, right? They wanted, obviously, continued access to our fish, but I would say more than any of that, they wanted to control our food standards so that we would remain a captive market, so that we wouldn't be able to import beef from Australia, Argentina, Canada, that might displace some of the EU imports that we have. They got their way on all of those things. Yeah. And what have we got in return? Well, I mean, do we count the passport e-gates thing?
We really shouldn't.
Something they could have done at any point, right? There was no technical reason. They were doing that purely vindictively. Right. Why should we reward them for taking off the table something they should never have put on it?
And for which apparently they have no jurisdiction anyway, because if the individual country decides not to give the e-gate access to us, we won't have it. But I mean, I said this yesterday, that's a bit of a shibboleth anyway, because whenever I've gone to Europe, I've been very happy to go through the non-EU gates because there's hardly anybody there. There's only British people.
I mean, I think the EU was making it difficult for individual airports that wanted to make it easier for us. Yeah. And because they introduced a new barrier that wasn't there pre-Brexit, and they chose to do that. But I mean, look, if the reason you should not have long queues at your airports is to make your airports more efficient, and that's why we have never required, passport stamps from EU nationals. We want our airports to work as quickly as and briskly as possible. Sure. I would hope that our neighbours would do the same. But if they absolutely insist on treating this as a negotiating position, then surely the deal is that we carry on with the reciprocity of our e-gates. It's not that we start making unrelated concessions in fishing and migration and money.
Of course not. And in fact, I've had plenty of messages this morning from people who are currently abroad who tell me that, when they went abroad, they got through the passport control sections, no problem at all. And as I say, I've certainly not found any delays, particularly with people because they had to stamp your passport as opposed to just looking at it. What I'd like to see, actually, genuinely, is a return to getting through places like Heathrow quicker, because you sometimes come home and you find you've got a bigger delay trying to get into your own country.
Well, that will come with technology, I'm sure. I went to Australia last year, and you do a kind of thing on your app. It takes about 5 minutes. You do your photograph, you upload a picture of your passport, and you can then, how about this? You can then arrive without taking your passport out of the bag. The face recognition does the whole.
That's good.
You know, in a few years' time, the whole world is going to be doing that. So this row is going to look like
it is ridiculous. And also, as the Sun have pointed out this morning, all of the giveaways will only amount to something like 0.3% of growth by 2040, for heaven's sake.
I mean, the basic problem here is a psychological one.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer never accepted Brexit. He spent 3 years trying to overturn it. And deep in his soul, he feels the need to atone. He feels the need to make it up to the EU for the supposedly appalling thing that the British people did in 2016. And if that is your attitude going into talks, the other side, I mean, in a way, you can't blame them, is going to respond as Brussels had by just saying, you know, okay, then give us your fish, give us your student, blah, 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 which is, I'm afraid, what's happened and is going to keep happening because, you know, there's a pattern here. We saw it with the Chagos talks.
Yeah.
If you see the traditional understanding of the national interest as some kind of colonialist, imperialist hang-up, you're not really going to be negotiating for Britain.
No, exactly. And what's your sense about how long this has been going on? Because we spoke yesterday to plenty of people, guests and members of the public, who just said, you know, there was no great mention of any of this in the Labour manifesto. You know, there was talk of possibly improving relations with the EU, but it didn't quite go as far as this has gone. Do you think they've been having these kind of secret conversations for a while?
Yeah, if anything, actually, I think the reality of office has made them slightly row back on how far they wanted to go. They've realized that there are benefits in being able to diverge. Yeah. And they boast, for example, about having different AI rules, different gene editing rules. And of course, they've been boasting a lot about having the India and US deals, which couldn't have happened except for Brexit. So I think the penny has dropped that it wasn't as simple as they thought it was in opposition, that the only problems were because of kind of, you know, British xenophobia or Tory standoffishness. They've realized that there are gains. For me, the biggest long-term problem with this deal, worse than the fisheries, worse than paying for the privilege, is that the obstacles it will put in the way of innovation in agriculture, in energy. The more we get drawn into the EU, the more uncompetitive we become in the world. And this is why, you know, they call it dynamic alignment. There's actually nothing in the world less dynamic than the EU.
No, I was going to say. And also, it's at a particularly low ebb as well. I made this point to Steve Baker and also to Sarah Poachin there. You know, the EU has never been at a lower point in terms of its success rate, its influence in the world, its ability to try to do anything, really. I mean, we saw that with the coalition of the willing. You know, as soon as Donald Trump speaks, you know, they jump, and as soon as he tells them to sit down, they sit down. And as soon as he says, go and find some money to bolster your peacekeeping force, they go, oh yeah, we'll do that, but we haven't really got anyone to send to Ukraine. We haven't really got much of an army.
Well, and all of that is true, and they have never been smaller as a proportion of the world economy, and that is a trend that is accelerating. So our exports to the EU had been falling for over a decade before the Brexit vote. That fall has continued. So when you get these Eurofiles saying, oh, look, our exports to the EU are down. Yeah, of course they are. Our exports to the EU have been in long-term decline because the rest of the world is getting bigger and the EU is getting smaller. Yeah. And that's why we need to be where the customers are. That's why we need to be pursuing our interests with the Pacific deal, with India, with the Americas and so on, which is where the growing populations are, where the young people are, where the growing middle classes and consumers are. We don't need to be tied to the one bit of the world that is not exhibiting any economic growth.
No, exactly right. And I mean, aside from the problems we're going to now have with the freedom of movement by another name, which could result in any number of hundreds of thousands of people coming here and remaining here for as long as they possibly want to do, it looks like energy prices will go up because, as Steve Baker said, they've got their carbon sort of regulations are much worse than ours. We already saw them with their net zero summit the other week, where we're sort of aligned already with them on green targets. You know, I just don't see any part of any of this which is going to result in food getting cheaper or energy getting cheaper or anything getting cheaper.
No, I mean, those things might incidentally happen for some other reason, like there's a revolution in Venezuela or something.
Yeah.
But as a result of this deal, definitely not. And actually, I think what you were just talking about there, Mike, the energy deal, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, that's a really underexplored part of this surrender. The carbon border adjustment mechanism is a kind of protectionist measure that makes it expensive to import anything that is made with energy, you know, a car or whatever it is, right? And the theory is that because you've got very high costs in Europe, you are replicating those costs to stuff that you import. In practice, what happens is that kills your domestic manufacturing. Because people go to where it's cheaper to make stuff. And we already have the most expensive commercial energy in the developed world. I'm afraid this is going to make it worse.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that Starmer can stand there really with a straight face and make out that this is a great new sort of era that we're about to enter. I mean, how is he deluded, do you think? I mean, what's your personal view of him as an individual? Because I mean, we all know he's a very bad communicator. We all know that he's very robotic and all of those things. But is he genuinely as deluded as he appears to be?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've seen, as I'm sure you have, all of those very funny compilation clips of him saying one thing and then saying the opposite.
Yeah, we play them out all the time.
Right. So it's hard to know really what's going on. But I suppose one interpretation is that actually this is not him being a terrible negotiator. It's him negotiating successfully for something that happens to be at odds with what the rest of us regard as the national interest.
Yeah.
So if your starting point is Brexit was a terrible mistake, okay, we can't go back on it because we promised, but what can we do to apologise for it?
Yeah.
What can we do to get back in the EU's good books? How can we show them that we don't think that we're better than them? And then from that point of view, it's been a great success because we've handed everything away.
Yeah, true. But I mean, he hasn't had to work very hard at that. I mean, you know, my sort of, you know, if I had a 10-year-old son, who's now 18 actually, he could probably have done the same deal because you just say, what do you want? You know, well, here it is. There you go. That's the end of the negotiation.
Yeah, well, I do have an 8-year-old son, and he's currently obsessed with Lord Nelson, having read Dominic Brooks' brilliant book for children on the subject.
Right.
And
well, he won't be allowed to bring that up. He won't be allowed to bring that up at school, will he?
Well, I mean, I was thinking, what was it? Nelson's prayer on the day of Waterloo. May the great God that I worship grant for my country and for the benefit of Europe in general a great victory. Right?
Yeah.
If Brexit succeeds, it's bad news for the Eurocrats because other people start getting ideas.
Yes.
Other nations in their system start thinking, maybe we could also live under our own laws. Maybe we could also hire and fire the people who pass them. And that is why they are so determined, even if it costs ordinary people in Europe a higher standard of living, why they are so determined not to let Brexit succeed at any cost to their own people.
And that was exactly what was beginning to happen, particularly with Giorgia Meloni over the whole Ukraine business, when she said, well, we're not going to send any troops there. And so suddenly the European Union was sitting there going, oh, what do you mean you're not going to do what we're telling you to do? Oh, we maybe didn't have the power we thought we had. Oh, and then suddenly, you know, the Germans are going, well, we're not too sure about it either. And you suddenly have the whole coalition just collapsing in itself, and Starmer's just giving them a massive, as I say, a massive sort of helping hand.
Yeah, but he's kind of like a leftover from the ideology of the early 90s.
Yeah.
I read a brilliant piece by somebody pointing out that the hero of Bridget Jones 2 was a human rights lawyer.
Yes.
And how this would be impossible now because that was the era when human rights lawyers were goodies. And now they're associated with, you know, helping every kind of terrorist and criminal.
Right.
And the rest of the world has moved on, right? Since Trump, that old order of elevating judges above democracy and elevating supranational codes above nation states, all of that is over, except with Starmer and Hermer and the other human rights lawyers who run the Labour Party. Britain is going to be the last country on earth still running around looking for some international court to surrender to or some EU-type association to subordinate itself before, when the rest of the world has gone back to national interests.
Yeah, it's quite depressing. But we should press upon, we'll press on, shall we not? Great to see you, Lord Hannon. Thank you very much indeed.
Nice to see you,
fantastic piece of The Sun today, page 10. He says this, to see how totally we have caved in, consider what ministers are trumpeting as their big victory, namely the ability to use EU passport e-gates. It is. I mean, that's the best they can come up with. Absolutely shocking. Let's get a voice note from Graham.
Morning, Mike. Great show as usual. I'm already planning to stay up all night in 4 years' time watching TV when the count is declared at the next general election. I want to see the look on the faces of Rayner, Reeves, Miliband and Lammy and Starmer when they are annihilated.
Yeah, that will be fun. But, I mean, we might all be done by then. You know, we might have, you know, the country might have given, sort of collapsed in on itself by that stage. Let's see. Here in Spain, says Michael, they make it harder for us Brits by having all the UK flights arrive at 5-minute intervals, thus causing a massive queue at one gate. Really? Richard says there is an easier way of avoiding any of the passport gates at airports, just arrive in a rubber dinghy like everybody else. That's Rick in Yorkshire. And Maggie in Cheshire says, as a keen Brexiteer, I'm furious with Starmer for what he's doing. Where was this reset mentioned in his manifesto? Well, it wasn't. That's my point. We've been stuffed by what I would call the Chagos principle, says Malcolm on the EU deal. Give something away for free and then pay for the privilege. Yeah, Malcolm in Hampshire. I couldn't disagree with that. Coming up, Sally Jones is here, former BBC sports reporter and presenter. We'll talk to her about Gary Lineker. His demise has cost him, apparently, close on £1 million. How sad. This is Talk.
Lineker is going apparently because of this rat image, but you know it's not really the first time, and I think this is really reflects terribly on the BBC that it's taken this long. He's got this history of platforming anti-Semitic tropes. He's got this history of disproportionate hostility towards Israel compared to anywhere else in the world. He's been silent throughout on Jewish suffering, especially since October the 7th.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It is 8:48. I don't know where the time goes on this show. I tell you what, we're almost into the final hour of the show. A bit of breaking news for you. An update on the firebombing of Keir Starmer's property. Romanian national Stanislav Kopiuk, aged 26, has been charged in relation to fires which damaged properties in a car linked to Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, according to the Metropolitan Police. They've also arrested, of course, the 36-year-old man who was arrested, I think, yesterday in Chelsea. So far, no charges brought against him, but now charges against the 21-year-old Ukrainian man and now a 26-year-old Romanian national by the name of Stanislav Kopiuk, who has been charged in relation to fires which damaged properties and a car linked to Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. The plot thickens. We'll bring you updates as and when we can. John from Gravesend says, when Starmer announced it was the first UK-EU summit, he did it in the same childish voice he announced Rachel Reeves as the first female Chancellor. And we know what a disaster she turned out to be. Yeah, he did that thing with a smile. Yeah, And same with the theme park. It's a theme park face as well. I never thought I'd be opening a theme park. There's the first female chancellor is coming, as if women can't do chancelloring jobs. It's ridiculous. Hi, Mike. What can we do to stop this betrayal? If we speak out, we get arrested. I actually despair what Starmer is doing to the UK. Well, you won't get arrested, Brian, if you speak out. You just have to make sure you don't speak out in a way which might lead you to be arrested, which is pretty easy to do. On Remembrance Sundays, when all the ex-Prime Ministers line up to pay tribute to the fallen, I hope Starmer is banned from attending. That man is a traitor to our country, says Reg. And Damien says, Sarah Poachin, absolutely fantastic, definitely a Prime Minister in waiting. I mean, I think she's a very impressive MP. For somebody who's literally just got into the business of being an MP for 2 weeks, she really is making some noise and making some people sit up and take notice of her. Ben says this, Mike, why doesn't the Tories or Reform tie two-tier up in legal cases so this EU surrender deal doesn't go through and then scrapped when Reform gets in at the next election? It's exactly what the Remainers did to the Brexiteers. Keep up the good work. Well, of course, what we know is that there is some kind of clause, which the people are calling the Reform Clause, which has been drafted into this agreement with the European Union, which is going to make it more difficult for anyone who comes in after Keir Starmer to unpick it all without paying a massive amount of money. Let's get a voice note from Emma.
Sarah Poachin, absolutely somebody with utter common sense. These are the people that need to be leading our country. Just when you thought Labour couldn't get any worse, here they go again. It's never, ever ending. 4 years cannot come quick enough. Utter betrayal of the people of our country, hard-working people of this country, put at the back of the queue yet again.
Emma, thank you very much for your thoughts. Coming up, we'll speak to Dame Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary, in the next hour. We'll find out what's going on from her point of view. First of all, though, let's speak to Sally Jones, former BBC sports reporter and presenter, because Gary Lineker, of course, still very much in the news today. Sally, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Nice to talk to you. Gary Lineker's sort of hoist with his own petard, as a lot of people have said, and his statement doesn't appear to show a great deal of remorse. Shall we have a quick look at it?
I've stood up for minorities and humanitarian issues and against all forms of racism all of my life, including, of course, anti-Semitism, which I absolutely abhor. There's no place for it and never should be. So I think it's best for all concerned that I step down from BBC presenting duties altogether and not do next season's FA Cup or World Cup. The final day of the Premier League season on Sunday will be my last show.
Well, trebles all round, some people would say. What do you make of it, Sally? I mean, it was only going to end this way, wasn't it?
I think it was. I think he'd handed so much ammunition against the BBC. He was a sort of serial betrayer, really, of the undertakings that he'd given to be impartial.
Yeah.
Many of his colleagues at the BBC would probably think along somewhat similar lines, though probably with a bit more nuance than he did. But they're the sort of people who've got the self-discipline and they understand a binding undertaking not to put their thumb in the scales and not to start advertising their own views when they are there specifically to be impartial. Right. As we saw with Emily Maitlis, her feet hardly touched the ground after she'd given a rant which very much betrayed her views. Yeah. And I really don't think that Lineker should be doing Sunday's programme. No. I don't think he should have this sort of swan song and adulation. Yes, he's a good presenter, but he's one of a number of very good football presenters that the BBC has. And sometimes it almost betrays a sort of lack of imagination on the part of the BBC that they can only see one person doing that role. So, yes, I mean, I think that the BBC have behaved in a very craven manner over it.
Because I'm reading between the lines. It looks as though they finally sort of read him the riot act and said, look, this is a step too far. You know, this ridiculousness that you're going to say to people that, you know, I didn't see the rat at the top of the tweet that I put out. You know, I didn't really, but when I did see it finally, I must have realised that it was something bad. And it's like, he must have seen it. He must have known what it was about. Of course he did. I put a tweet out last night saying, did he think it was some kind of symbol of the Chinese New Year or something? No, because it was a tweet from a group of people who are quite frequently anti-Semitic. And as somebody from the Jewish Chronicle said to me last week, it's not that Gary Lineker's anti-Semitic, he just keeps retweeting people who are.
Also, I have actually very rarely, if ever, heard him make any stance against anti-Semitism. He apparently said nothing after the October the 7th.
No, he made no comment until October the 8th, when he started giving Israel a hard time for attacking Gaza.
I mean, the problem has been that the BBC has been enmeshed in a number of Israel-Gaza controversies, particularly with the son of the Hamas official who they chose to present a video about it without actually revealing that he was the son of a Hamas official.
Yeah.
And the problem with what Lineker's been doing is it hands so much ammunition to those who are enemies of the BBC. I mean, I'm sometimes ambivalent about what the BBC does. I obviously worked for it for a number of years.
Yeah.
And sometimes the sort of wokeness and the sort of unified, slightly pinko lefty Islington stance is annoying, but it also does a number of things which no other broadcaster does because it has a unique role at the centre of our national life. I think despite its silliness and its bias at times, I think the world would be a far, far worse place without it.
Yes.
You look at things like BBC World and all the other aspects.
I think it'd be certainly a far worse place without bits of it. I think some other bits of it you could lose altogether and not miss them at all. But that's the tragedy. They've allowed the sort of overarching company to digress into so many different weird parts of broadcasting and online activity that they've sort of neglected in a way what their core audience wants them to do, and they've neglected what they're really good at. So many people now just don't watch it because they're so fed up with it.
And also, I think that in many ways they, to some extent, destroy some regional media. I'm quite involved with publicising various charities.
Yeah.
And it saddens me to see regional newspapers, local independent radio, being very much hit by things like the BBC website, which I think, because it's staffed by predominantly young people, tends to be a lot more biased and a lot more woke in a bad way than the rest of the BBC. And I think it's because it's these sort of young freebooters who are there.
Exactly, and they took a massive sort of machete to local BBC radio, which for an awful lot of people was a real lifeblood because of the fact that they operated in some parts of the country where there was no really commercial alternative. This was playing. If you go to something like Shropshire, BBC Shropshire, people loved listening to it. And it's not now what it was. I think they've amalgamated more of them so that they're less local, if you like.
We live in the middle of Warwickshire, among rather miles from anywhere. We're about 3 miles from the nearest town, and virtually all my neighbours, many of them farmers, local labourers, people just living in little slips of villages. It used to be a lot of BBC local radio used to be an absolute lifeline because they really felt it belonged to them.
Right.
And now, when it's 4 or 5 different stations without their specific Warwickshire identity being put to the fore, they do feel betrayed.
Yeah.
And why have the BBC been paying Lineker this vast fortune when he has neither judgment nor is he a particularly he's not a unique talent. Obviously, no one's a unique talent, but it does seem bonkers to be spending money on something like that when areas like the World Service, BBC local radio are being slashed. They're absolutely being cut to the bone, and it's heartbreaking.
It is, because those are the things that they should be, praising, and they should be sort of championing and lionising, because that's what the BBC was meant to be. Proper public service broadcasting, not kind of, flashy and strictly come dancing this and match of the day that. Who cares?
The independent sector can do that, no trouble. Some of my mates who are local radio and local TV reporters are some of the most knowledgeable, the most absolutely dedicated to their patch of any reporter or journalist that you could find. And to see those people either having to diversify or being kicked out of the BBC because they're slashing journalist roles all over the place is so sad. I'd often thought maybe in old age I'd go back to maybe try to do, just local radio because it's a gorgeous thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The local
magazine.
The local flower, exchanges and all the sort of, the industrial, the agricultural fairs and all that. Anyway, listen, we've got to run. Good to talk to you, Sally Jones. Thank you very much indeed, former BBC sports reporter and presenter. Coming up, Dame Priti Patel in the next hour. We'll talk to James Heale as well, deputy political editor at The Spectator. We'll continue to keep you updated. Matt Vickers is here as well on the tragedy of what Keir Starmer is doing to this country. This is Morning Glory, back after the news. We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah, a rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field." Put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson had been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham, and of course, this is the home of common sense. It's the one place to come to get your views not only heard, but properly amplified, because we listen to what you have to say, and we're one of the few people that then actually broadcast it to the nation. To wit, let's get a voice note from Ben.
Morning, Mike. Ben from Frimley here. I think by the time the next general election comes round in 2029, it will be a repeat result with Reform winning on a Brexit vote like Boris won in 2019. And then a whole decade would have slipped by from 2019 to 2029, where our whole nation would have learnt nothing and we're back to square one. Keep the faith, mate. Only another 50 months to go of Labour.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? People were saying only this weekend, people were writing pieces in the Sunday papers about how, the nation's kind of changed. We've sort of moved on from Brexit. People don't really expect to be part of the European Union again, but they sort of are sorry that we're not. All of these narratives were being spun out by otherwise quite sensible people, trying to make out that in fact we were now ready for some kind of Brexit realignment, some kind of EU realignment, some kind of change in the way that we do business with the European Union. But what we've ended up with, thanks to Keir Starmer, is a complete surrender, a complete betrayal of those people who voted for Brexit, and a complete kind of, supplication to the European Union and all that it stands for. And as Steve Baker said when he came in just an hour or so ago, people voted to leave the European Union for a variety of reasons. They wanted to not be governed by a foreign entity. They wanted to not be governed by people who are not with the best interests of this country at heart. Julie Hartley-Brewer's just popped in, as it were. Nice to see you. She'll be here in about an hour. It's 4 minutes past 9. I'm going to speak to Dame Priti Patel coming up very shortly. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. So, how about this? One of the worst things about Traitor Keir's deal is that the carbon tax agreement will prevent any new fossil fuels and fracking, etc., being invested in, as it will break the treaty, says Andy in Cornwall. And Brian in Liverpool says, morning, Mike. All this shows Keir Starmer doesn't understand the British public. We aren't bothered about e-gates. We're British and we love a queue. I wonder what his personal gain is to sell our fishermen and women down the river. Literally, I am raging. Let's speak to Dame Priti Patel now, because I tell you what, there is nothing worse than people listening to this show and raging about what it is that I'm telling them. But I have not seen people this angry. Priti Patel, very good morning to you. Since the Labour government took away the winter fuel allowance to pensioners, I mean, that's how angry people are. They're so annoyed that this has been done.
And I'm not surprised. Mike, I'm not surprised. I'm not at all surprised. Good morning to you. I mean, look, this is a complete betrayal of Brexit, and I've heard some of the comments that you've been reading out. People, your viewers, your listeners, they gave the then Conservative government of the day in 2016 a clear instruction, which was to leave the EU. And what we're now seeing is sheer dishonesty from Keir Starmer and his appalling Labour government that have deceived the public. You know, yes, they said they'd have a reset, but what they've effectively done is that they're signing up to a foreign court, the European Court of Justice all over again. We've got to pay for the privilege of the indignity of going back into the European Court and being a rule taker, and they've sold out our fishermen with a 12-year deal. And I understand that Starmer went into the negotiations saying he wanted a 4-year deal, but he's come out 100 times worse with a 12-year deal, which is basically going to put British fisheries in proper jeopardy now. And I have to say, I see these guys, the Labour MPs, Labour government every day. You know, their instincts are not the same instincts of those of the British people. They don't care about Britain in the way in which that your listeners do, or my party does and did when we campaigned for Brexit and delivered Brexit. And a classic example of this is, look at how they're wrecking our domestic economy. You mentioned winter fuel payments. Look at the family farm tax. Look at increases on national insurance. And they've got the audacity to put out a press release yesterday saying this is good for Britain. I think he's taken us all for fools, and it just shows how arrogant and out of touch they are.
Yeah, I mean, an awful lot of people yesterday were saying to me, isn't it disgraceful and disgusting that the Downing Street's boasting about bringing out the expensive champagne, 4 cases of it, to toast the fact that they'd really done such a great deal with Europe, that they've walked us back into something that people don't want. As Steve Baker said when he was here, you know, people voted to leave the European Union because they didn't want to be governed by a foreign entity and by a group of people sitting in Brussels, unelected, who were telling them how they should be living. And they don't want it now.
That's right. That's exactly right. You just hit the nail on the head. That was a political instruction. Let's be quite clear. Brexit was a political instruction from the British people. They did not want to be lectured anymore, patronised anymore, pay, you know, Brussels to tell us how to live our lives. And I have to say, you know, basically briefing out, which is what the government did, that's government civil servants as well, that they were cracking open champagne yesterday to celebrate this when people are struggling around the country, having winter fuel payments taken away from them, businesses in my constituency having to now make choices on who they employ because of their increases in taxes and national insurance. You know, people really struggling because of energy bills, which, by the way, Labour said that they'd decrease energy bills by £300 and they haven't. It just shows that we've got a government, Keir Starmer, his Labour cronies, a Deputy Prime Minister and others, Angela Rayner, you know, lapping up the privileges of being in government government and cozying up to their buddies in the EU, swigging champagne, when ordinary, hard-working British people are struggling, really struggling right now to keep things together, and businesses are closing in this country because of Labour's terrible, terrible economic car crash that they've inflicted upon the country. I think that's just outrageous. It shows how out of touch they are. It shows how arrogant they are. And it shows they just want to be in power. And it's kind of like, you know, to hell with all you people. And just one final point on this. The fact that we've got a Labour government that has spent recent months, 9 months, you know, cancelling local elections. That's that woman, Angela Rayner. You know, cancelling local elections, taking away the democratic right of people to exercise their vote, tells you everything that you need to know. These people are behaving like autocrats. They really are. And I genuinely now fear for the governance of our country with this direction of travel.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when those elections are held next year, they'll probably get slaughtered again. But, you know, they're talking about this deal with Europe as if there's something good in it. You know, they're telling us that food prices are going to come down, that we're going to be able to access markets that we couldn't access before. Again, you know, I think when you check into these claims of theirs, they're all absolute cobblers.
So that's the point. They had the audacity to put in that sort of state-sponsored press release that they put out yesterday that, you know, we'd be better off by £9 billion. What they didn't say is that's over a 15-year period and there's no economic data on that. And also what they didn't say is where did that number come from? And civil servants who drafted that state-sponsored press release should put a reference as to where that number came from. This is just a joke. They're making it up as they go along. You know, Brits and queuing going into Europe, well, I'm afraid there's something called EES, which is the EU entry and exit system. The EU were doing digitalisation of their borders anyway, in the same way I was doing when I was Home Secretary, because guess what? We live in a digital era, and that scheme comes into place in October, where we'll all have to give our fingerprints. You know, when you put your fingerprints down and give all your biometrics, the EU are doing that. And the fact that they're saying that this is some kind of success is just, it's misleading. It's deliberate deception to the British people. You know, they got a Home Secretary that didn't basically put any facts to this. It is a fact that these schemes and systems were already in place. And so I'm going to say it, they're lying to the British people. And you know what? That's what undermines our democracy. That's what undermines trust and confidence in British politics and British politicians. That's why the public voted to leave the EU. And I'm afraid Labour are culpable for that. They're complicit now in running down our democracy and democratic accountability.
Yeah, and having already now handed back what you might call is the legislative sort of, you know, weapon that the EU can now use against the UK, they've also put a clause apparently inside of this new deal, which means that anybody who wins the next election, if they choose to try and reverse what happens, there will be massive fees to pay for the privilege.
Yeah, I mean, that's outrageous. And the point of, you know, the point about this reset, no reset is better than a bad reset. And also in any reset, you must never tie the hands, you know, off your domestic economy, you know, future trade negotiations and things of that nature. They've done that. And by the way, Mike, you know, that building you see behind me, Parliament, you know, Keir Starmer was too busy swigging champagne yesterday afternoon than come into Parliament to explain his actions and to be scrutinised democratically by MPs and peers, which is outrageous. And this whole thing now, they've introduced sort of clauses that, quite frankly, I think in the sense of democratic freedom and openness and free trade, we absolutely have to scrutinise and run the slide rule over. It is wrong. He didn't have the mandate to do that. You know, he could only say he had the mandate to do that if he was honest with the public last year at the general election. And basically, they're pulling the wool over the eyes of the British people. They're treating everyone as if we're all stupid, which is dreadful. I mean, I think that's a very Labour thing. You know, they claim to be the party of working people, but clearly they show contempt to the very working people that pay their taxes, go out every day and work hard, and actually, you know, through their taxes are paying for these guys to drink champagne in Downing Street.
They say that. And one final one, there's a new poll out today, YouGov poll, puts Tories into 4th place behind the Lib Dems. Reform leading on 29%, Labour on 25%, Lib Dems on 17%, Tories on 16%. You guys have got a lot of work to do, haven't you?
We have. I'll be the first to say that. I mean, I've been around in my party for a while, Mike. I remember 1997. You know, it's going to take time. We had the biggest electoral defeat that we've ever experienced in our history last year. We have to win back the trust and confidence of the British people. And I can tell you now, we do that by calling a spade, being honest with the public, calling out deception when we see deception, as we've just seen on Brexit, and a mass betrayal. You know, people like me, you know, we believe in public service and fighting for the principles of our country. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I can tell you now, we are doing it, and it is going to take time for us to rebuild, but we're absolutely committed to making sure we get back to winning ways all over again and standing up for our country and for the British people.
Dame Priti Patel, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Shadow Foreign Secretary there. That poll, of course, just out this morning on YouGov puts the Green Party in 5th place, but the Tories down there on 16%, beneath the Lib Dems, which is the first time that's been the case since about 2019, I'm told. James Heale actually tweeted that out for us, and we're going to be speaking to James in a moment. Let's get a quick voice note from Laura.
I cannot believe how truly terrible this EU deal is, and what a betrayal Starmer has wreaked out on this country. It really is codswallop. But sadly, once our fisheries and our fishing fleet has been decimated, no one's going to even know what that means anymore. Feeling quite depressed today. Anyway, great show, Mike.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. I think a lot of people are feeling a mixture of depressed and angry and just generally cheesed off in a massive way with this government and how they're conducting themselves, because this is not exactly the first time they've put a foot wrong. It's all they've done. In fact, if they could put a foot right, that would be easy to remember. Let's talk to James Heale from The Spectator. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I mean, quite extraordinary how angry people are about this. I've been saying this morning that the last time I saw people as angry as this, in fact, probably not quite as angry as this, was when the pensioners' winter fuel allowance was taken away by Keir Starmer. It does appear to be a complete misstep by Starmer, and I know that there'll be people who are happy about it. There'll be people who voted to remain who will be happy. But he has done what he said he wouldn't do, which is to bring back all of those old arguments and all of those old schisms in our society that supposedly sensible people said we shouldn't have anymore.
And crucially, of course, sign a deal that hurts the fishing industry.
Yeah.
Priti Patel there says that everything, the expectation among a lot of officials and commentators was for a 4-year deal on fishing. Instead, it's a 12-year deal. What that means, of course, is that a lot of the older people involved in fishing, the fishermen, will retire, and the young ones simply won't come in, and therefore you really risk the loss of a historic British industry. Yeah. I mean, The Economist has a political rule which is never go to war with a profession that was depicted in a children's picture book. First, Labour did it with the farmers, now they're doing it with the fishermen. It seems to be a bit of a habit, going after highly visible, highly emotive industries that, while they may not, in Treasury thinking, contribute a huge amount to the economy, are actually hugely symbolic to the people of the country. And I think you can see that in polling. You know, the Good Growth Foundation, which is the Labour-aligned think tank, they showed that fishing is one of the things that people really care about. Even though people aren't involved with the fishing industry directly, they very much care about the future of their fishermen.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we were speaking to a fisherman earlier who was saying to us that, you know, because we were coming to the end, effectively, of a sort of transition period, there were a lot of younger people who were hoping to get into the fishing business, and certainly down in Cornwall, Steve Baker was telling me, where his constituency was, that there was whole villages which had been sort of decimated by the lack of the ability to fish, but they were hopeful that with the end of this transition period, they could start doing the business again. And that's now been completely taken away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you know, Labour was very keen before the election to talk about the left behind, sort of the communities that were forgotten. I remember Lisa Nandy doing a huge campaign on coastal communities and an attempt to win coastal seats. And now, of course, it's sadly that the only people sort of sailing in English waters right now are going to be the small boats crossing the channel.
Well, somebody said that to me. You know, when Keir Starmer said he was going to stop the boats, we didn't know it was going to be the fishing boats he was going to stop. But, you know, you can use that line anytime you like. But let's talk about what exactly happens next, because, again, a bit like the American deal, a bit like the India deal, you know, it makes a good press conference if you like that sort of thing. But there's an awful lot of detail that hasn't really come out.
Yeah, a huge amount that still needs to be worked out. I mean, the reference on food standards talks about a contribution cost. How much is that going to be over what time scale? We've also got a huge amount of sort of talking still to be done. I mean, the most exciting thing on defence, and I thought defence was potentially one of the big wins for this government, was going to be about if the UK can access the EU 150 billion European Defence Fund. Well, there's going to actually be a new mechanism set up for further talks in the future. So it seems to be more talking shops.
Yes.
A bad deal for fishers, unfortunately.
Exactly right. And the amount of money that we're going to have to put into the European Union is not that clear, but it seems like an awful lot more than we've got.
Yeah, and I think that what's really striking about this deal is that, there's a huge amount of political capital that's going to be spent on it. And yet, actually, I think the most bullish government statistics we've seen thus far gives them a sort of 0.3% GDP improvement. I mean, frankly, that's not going to pay for much of Labour's massive spend on, for instance, GB Energy or net zero commitments, etc.
Yeah.
So I really don't think that it's going to be the win that a lot of the Labour people are out there, as Priti Patel was there saying, popping champagne corks, etc.
Well, like everything they've done in the 10 months they've been in, they haven't quite got it right, have they? I mean, there's always been something slightly wrong with it. It's always been announced with a great fanfare. I mean, look at Rachel Reeves's budget is now a complete dud. The announcement of GB Energy and the GB Energy bill, which was supposed to be a sort of a magnet for investment from firms, it now turns out to be the complete opposite. They've just given 600 million quid to the owners of Scottish Power. Who are a massive energy company, who are supposed to be coming in with the other way with the money. The same as the Stop the Boats campaign, didn't work. The education campaign, putting VAT on schools, it resulted in 13,000 kids leaving private school and coming back into the state system. They predicted 3,000. Their jobs plan is not going to provide 2 million jobs, it's going to provide about 100,000 jobs. Everything that they say is going to be a great idea basically isn't.
Do you know what? You're so spot on about that point about learning on the job. You bring someone into a job, you want them to have learnt their craft and be able to fix the improvements you've signed them up for and paid them a handsome amount. Labour have a really bad track record, unfortunately, of coming into office and learning on the job. Rachel Reeves was warned about the nom-doms. She was warned about private school tax. She was warned about the inheritance tax, the reason why successive ministers haven't done it the past 10 years. All these different policies, and unfortunately it's going to be Britain who ends up paying the price for that. Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk about what you just were tweeting about earlier on in the hour, about this new poll which shows the Tories in 4th place. I put it to Priti Patel that they've got a lot of work to do. I think her answer was reasonably gracious, but they're in a bad place here, aren't they? Massively, and she was talking about 1997. Of course she would say that, but unfortunately the Tories are in a lot worse place than 1997. Back then, of course, they made gains at the following local elections. They were still polling clearly as the second party in sort of 30-35%. Right now they're closer to 15-16%, 4th place behind the Liberal Democrats, Reform and Labour as well. They're only 6 points off the Greens, and I've already had one text from a sitting Tory MP this morning saying, it's not so much renewal as resuscitation. Really, really lots of downbeat Conservatives right now ahead of later today. There's going to be a shadow cabinet meeting, and all this, of course, at the same time that Boris Johnson is re-emerging. So it just makes, I think, Kemi Badenoch look like she's failing to do the job properly or cutting through. Yeah, well, that's it. And you've also said that a lot of Tory members are split as to whether or not she will be their leader at the next election. I don't think she will. I think that the big sense in the party right now, particularly in Parliament, is 12 months. They've had this massive hit of the local elections, doing a lot worse than any of them thought. Next year there's Wales and Scotland. If they come 4th there, lose more seats, go backward. She's not sort of holding the line on 23%, which is what Rishi got last year. It's actually going down to sort of, 15-17%. So I think this next 12 months could be the make or break period for Kemi Badenoch. And there are others, of course, who think this could be the best thing that's ever happened to reform. Just when you didn't want to turbocharge Nigel Farage's, engines, here we go. On Brexit, yes, certainly. I think that it was quite striking just how much he was the one making the political weather on this. And I think that, it's going to be something that we see more of because, as I say, this is not the end. Everyone keeps thinking of these things like the Windsor Framework, or the 2020 deal at the end. They never are. This is the first of a series of summits, perpetual rolling summits and negotiation. And the danger is, of course, every time Labour signs up to something that people don't want in this country, Nigel Farage will be able to stand there and say, betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. So I think that it's going to be a narrative that we see over the next 4 years. But Nigel is also very keen to emphasise that I think he's moved on from the Brexit years in some sense. He's got a lot bigger. He's not just talking about Europe now, he's talking about other things. So the Brexit thing will be one element, an important element in his armoury, but not the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. James, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. James Heale, Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator. Let's get a voice note from Craig.
Hiya, Mike. Just a word on Starmer's betrayal. How long is it going to be before the European Union sues through the European Court for age discrimination on letting students across? The argument's going to be, well, if a 30-year-old can go, why not a 31-year-old go? I guarantee you in a year it's going to be every age, full movement, absolutely without a doubt. He's an absolute traitor.
Yeah. It's definitely a thin end of the wedge, no question about that. And you can see every single piece of, legislation that they're putting into place is a way of sort of opening up yet another aperture to the European way of doing things. And that, I'm afraid, is very plain to see. I voted Remain but accepted the result, says Balm. One rule in life is to never go back. You will always be on the defensive with huge trust issues on both sides and vulnerable to the same mistakes. I'm sure many Remainers would now vote Leave. I'm confident the people would repeat the outcome. Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. Stuart says, I have to say, well said, Priti, and she needs to join Reform, the sooner the better. Margaret says, wow, Priti Patel is fantastic. I wish she was leader. She would really let Starmer know how we feel it. Yeah, well, I think so. When she referred to Angela Rayner as that woman, I think we all know what she means, don't we? 9:23.
Oh, yay, we're going to get a little bit more access for British artists touring Europe, yay. And apparently we're going to get access to use e-gates when we travel to EU countries, which, by the way, all EU countries have been entitled to already, which is why sometimes you arrive at a country, you can use the e-gate, and sometimes you can't. And it's entirely up to them now, and even under this deal, it'll still be entirely up to those member states. So what on earth have we got back for basically surrendering yet another benefit of Brexit?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 9:27. We're here for just about another half an hour. It's been an incredible show. Lots and lots of you have got so much to say. Let's get another voice note from Joanne.
Morning, Mike. Joanne from Norfolk. Keir Starmer, absolute traitor. What more can you say? He doesn't care about the voters, the country. He doesn't care about his own popularity, it seems, or his party's popularity. They seem to be at the bottom of his list. He doesn't want to do anything that's positive for this country. He's falling over himself to engage us again with an organisation that is corrupt to its core. Honestly, they couldn't do more damage to this country than if it was hit by a comet. 4 more years of this? Come on, comet. Great show. Thanks, Mike.
Joanne, thanks very much indeed. People are so annoyed with all of this. Ian says, Dame Priti is right, but the Conservatives put us up the creek and didn't give us a paddle. Dean says, does the EU surrender deal torpedo the US trade deal? signed by the Donald. We are, or should I say, we were an independent nation. The US might see EU goods avoiding higher rate tariffs by exporting via the UK. Well, I think that's a very good point, and we don't yet know exactly how Donald Trump is going to react to all of this. But I don't suspect it's going to be a good reaction. I think he's going to say, "You guys have done the wrong thing. You better reverse it, or else we're going to start charging you more money." But let's talk now to Nigel Hamilton. He's a victim of the infected blood scandal, a scandal that has still been going on decades and decades and decades after it all happened back in the 70s and the 80s. There's growing disquiet among a lot of people who have been affected that they won't actually manage to see any compensation before they pass on. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks very much for talking to us. It's a shocking state of affairs, this, that we should even still be talking about it, where compensation has not yet been paid. What is the hold-up here?
The hold-up is that they have determined that the system they intend to use is a system of learn, and the learning process has been extremely slow. Right. Learn and test with the system.
Right.
Apologies.
I think Nigel's on a train or something. We'll try and come back to you, Nigel. Sorry, because it's not really a very good line. We'll try and get that line back and get it sorted out. Mr. Hughes, James rather, in Hereford says this: access to e-gates is useless for families as children cannot use them. That's probably half of holidaymakers that won't benefit from this pointless pocket change to the big giveaway. Well, I've never been in favour, as I say, as you know, since talking about it yesterday, that this was anything like a great big plus for anyone. Because for most people, depending on where you're going and where you're flying to, that sort of tends to decide on how bad the queue is going to be, either coming or going. Let's talk to Gareth, who wants to talk about the e-gates as well. Gareth in Derbyshire. Hi, Gareth.
Good morning, Mike.
Morning, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. We always put Derbyshire first in Derbyshire. That's the best way to look at it. But, what I wanted to, I mean, Starmer has done a negotiation. He's negotiated away our fishing rights plus various other benefits of Brexit, so we can go through an e-gate. Now, I don't want to be funny, but I've been probably travelling for about 50 years or something like that.
Yeah.
I haven't got a problem with showing my passport and having it stamped, and I quite like it.
No, I quite like it. When they changed it around, right, when we left, so the point, it just took a little while, didn't it? But I remember flying into the first place I flew into where they stamped my passport. I was like, this is great. It's like when I was a kid, we used to get passports stamped, and it never took any longer.
I don't mind queuing if I have to queue. I'm British. I quite like queues, actually. I stand there and take my time.
Right.
I mean, I went to the south of France at the beginning of April to a small airport.
Yeah.
There was only one way through, and there was two people all stamping and looking at passports. There wasn't any e-gates anyway.
Right.
So this is Starmer. So he's thrown away all the fishermen's fishing waters for 12 years.
Yeah.
No doubt that'll probably be extended for another 12 years after that.
Yeah.
Because he'll have had some terrible negotiation with this lady in Brussels. And that's all we've got out of it. Now, the other thing is given freedom of movement for European students to sign up for universities. This is at a time when our kids, our English, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish kids are doing their A-levels and trying to get into our universities. And every one of those places that a European student takes, and it's only because they're wealthy and the parents can pay £25,000.
Yeah.
It isn't because they're AAA students.
No, well, don't worry about that, though. We're giving them a discount. They can go for the same price as our kids go.
Well, that's even worse, because my daughter's doing her A-levels at the moment. She's panicking. One's already there, but the other one is trying to get into university. She's been quoted to get in at places like Bristol, AAA. And then the students who come from all over the world, just for the money, they can come and take the places. There's already nearly 50% foreign students in British universities.
Yeah, and the thing about the university sector, they started getting worried because they were losing money, because fewer students were coming from abroad because they couldn't bring their dependents with them, right? So now they've had to do something else to bulk up the amount of money the universities are going to make.
But universities are short of money because they've gone outlandishly ridiculous spending money on all these property developments that they've got in every city. You know, if you go into Newcastle, the city centre's basically got one student union building after another with student accommodation in it. It's the same in places like Nottingham and Bristol and such like. And they run all the bars. You know, 20, 25 years ago, all the pubs used to get the trade from the kids, but they now go into the bars of the universities. The lecturers don't turn up a lot of the time to the lectures. I think they ought to get their house in order and go back to basics and don't spend so much money on all these lavish projects.
No, the trouble is that
they send kids. Nottingham is... I've got nothing against Chinese students, but when half your university is full of Chinese students, and Nottingham University have got a replica of Nottingham University in China... Now, where's the money going? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, this is the thing. Tony Blair decided it was a great idea to turn universities into businesses, right? And that's what they now are. They're not actually schools of learning at all. They're just about making money. It's ridiculous. Gareth, you make a very good point. Thank you. Let's get a voice note from Dave. Is that an old one?
Good morning, Mike. Dave in Spain here. Well, OK, Starmer's sold us up the Swanee, but one consolation for me, at least when I pop down to my local Mercadona to do a bit of shopping for a bit of fish, I can look at the cod and think, oh, look, that could well be British cod.
Yeah, I'm afraid so, Dave. It may well be. British fishermen should take a leaf out of the French and ignore any rulings and just carry on fishing, says Debbie. They get away with breaking all the rules, so we should as well. There ain't no space in jail, and if they've been arrested on a boat, then say we're an asylum seeker and we'll just get you off free anyway. Very good. You've obviously given that some thought. Steve says Starmer is just trolling us now. That's why he looks so happy every time he stitches us up. He also gleefully tweets, obviously hoping to get some people nicked who tell him what they think of him. Yeah, maybe. And Sarah says, Mike, I'm really worried now. Are we going to get this government out? Are they now going to change our constitution so there's no election in 4 years' time? Is the EU now going to dictate to us who runs this country? I'm now living in fear. I don't think you should quite live in fear, but there is lots to be upset about and certainly lots to fix. That's what I'm going to say. Diane in Teesside says, Mike, if I was a Labour MP and a Brexiteer, I would resign from the party and continue to represent my constituents as an independent. I wonder how many of Sir Keith's backbench would have the integrity to do the same. What have they got to lose? They might even save their own skins at the next election and be able to sleep at night. Long may the home of common sense keep keeping on. Absolutely right. Well, listen, I'm delighted to keep on keeping on because with this government, there's never a dull moment. There's never a day that goes by when you haven't got something to rail about, to be angry about. Coming up, Matt Vickers is here. He's, of course, Shadow Minister of State for Immigration, Crime and Policing. He's going to talk about the shoplifting crisis in this country because things have got so bad that Greggs have basically decided to hide away all of the stuff they used to keep out in an open fridge, like the bottles of water, the sandwiches, the things that you could pick up and just pay for at the till, because people just won't stop stealing them. So they've now decided to put them behind the counter so nobody will nick them. That's the state of affairs that we've come to in this country. It's absolutely shameful, absolutely shocking. What on earth is going on? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:38. I'm Mike Graham. I really wish these Tory MPs, says Alan, would stop saying we delivered Brexit. If they had, we wouldn't be in this situation now. Can you correct them next time they say they delivered it? They didn't. And on the subject of old Gary Lineker, Brad says, Mike, Lineker's so-called apology was nothing more than an opportunity for him to tell us how worthy and woke he is. He came across as a martyr. And Peter says, on the next presenter for Match of the Day, there is Kelly Cates, Kenny Dalglish's daughter. She's really likeable, very experienced, and in my opinion, underrated. She will surprise many people, says Peter in Croydon. Yeah, I think Kelly's great. Easily as good as Gary Lineker, no question at all. And nowhere near as virtue signally. Let's talk now, though, to Matt Vickers, MP, Shadow Minister for Immigration, Crime and Policing. He's here with us because of the shoplifting manoeuvrings that are going on. The Sun put out a story yesterday saying that Greggs have had to move all of their stuff out of the normal fridge at the front half of the shop, which you can get to before you go to see the people that are at the tills. All of the water bottles, all the drinks, all the sandwiches, all the things that they keep there. Why? Because people keep nicking them. Absolutely extraordinary. Matt, very good morning to you.
Good morning. How's it going?
Yeah, very well indeed. I mean, this is a terrible thing to have to happen to a so-called civilised country, that shoplifting is now reached such epic proportions that everything's got to be put behind a sort of wall, effectively.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a line in the sand, actually. You know, like, people have been going on about shoplifting is horrendous. It's through the roof.
Yeah.
We've seen it up 20% on the year. That's madness. Like, how are these businesses supposed to operate when everything they put out disappears out the door with no one?
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen footage of it, haven't we? People literally walking in, taking, say, 3 things, and just walking out, and, you know, nobody stops them. They don't seem to be in any way alarmed by the fact that they're committing a crime, because they know they're just going to get away with it.
We've seen it sort of going up and up and up, and it's a huge challenge for all these. You know, I mean, we talk about Amazon killing the high street.
Yeah.
Actually, these people are killing the high street by walking out with everything these shops on. But I think the Greggs thing is just a proper line in the sand. It's a point in which you just think, how have we got to a point where this happens in Britain on our high streets? People think they can walk in there, nick a sandwich. Like, just, it's absolutely stunning that that's the social fabric of society now.
Yeah.
I look at that. It's just atrocious.
I know, and I'm sure it's not just Greggs that's happening, and it just so happens to be Greggs that have taken this decision because, you know, how have we got here? Because, I mean, first of all, when this all started happening, you'd get people going, oh, you know, these are people who can't afford to eat. So, you know, I mean, it doesn't look like that, judging by some of the people going in there. They're just doing it because they know they can.
Some of them do look like they've had one too many Greggs, actually. But I think the reality is that I think this just captures the public's sort of visual of it, because it's been going through the roof. The retailers have been talking about it for ages. The police have been talking about it for ages. These retailers are spending an absolute fortune on stuff to try and prevent this happening. But the Greggs example is just something where you think this is really cheap stuff. Yeah. This is not people going and taking a big risk because there's something lucrative in it for them. This is just absolutely disgusting situation where people think they can literally walk in a shop, pick up what they want, and off they go. And I think Greggs is one of them high street favourites anyway, isn't it? That's what gets us all as well.
Well, it is. I suppose there's a lot of them, and they're easily sort of accessible and all of that. But, I mean, they're going to have to redesign all of their shops apart from everything else. It's going to cost them money because you can't put all that stuff just behind the counter because there's already stuff behind the counter. So presumably they'll sort of eventually have to move the counter forward and put it in front of the fridge, if you like.
Well, the future for high streets, for all these retailers, is just really, really grim because they're competing with online sales now in all sorts of ways. Maybe it's not great, but lots of these retailers are facing that challenge. They're facing this challenge of the jobs tax that's costing them all a fortune. Yeah. More retailers are being slammed by the increase in business rates because the Labour have took away this small business rates relief for leisure, hospitality and retail. It's virtually doubling the business rates of little independent businesses. Yeah. But what is the high street going to look like in 5 years' time? It's scary. It's really scary. It's going to be boarded up shops with anybody who's managed to defend their goods well enough from all these thieves.
Yeah, a couple of charity shops and a load of parking wardens walking around waiting to put a parking ticket on your car, probably. Next thing you see gun shops growing up because people all just want to start buying them. Let me ask you about the state of the economy generally, though, because we're expecting, I think, some inflation figures out tomorrow, which could be as high as 3.3%, we're told. And if that's true, up from 2.6%, that's quite a jump.
It's all the indicators. The dashboard is red. You see it on inflation. This is terrifying because it's a cost on everybody's pocket. You see on unemployment on the up. People are without work. We had near record levels of employment. Growth is stagnant. The entire thing's gone wrong because anybody who wants to invest in this country at the moment is being taxed to death. If you create jobs, they're coming for you. It's just, why would you invest when the situation is becoming so grim? And there's a woman behind the door at number 11 who seems determined to absolutely unleash hell on anybody who wants to work hard and get on with their lives.
Yes, I know. It seems incredible how wrong they're getting everything, including, of course, famously, yesterday's deal with the EU, which nobody can believe. I mean, my audience has never been this angry before.
Well, the conclusion of the entire thing is that A, we're taking more laws from the EU, B, we're giving more control to the European Court of Justice, and C, we're going to send more money, more taxpayers' money to the EU. It's a lose-lose. It's just a disaster. And the fishing situation is just unbelievable, actually. Unbelievable. 12 years. 12 years.
I mean, that'll be affecting people up in your neck of the woods, won't it?
Oh, huge. And I mean, the problem is the people making these decisions are the types who float around down here in Westminster. They don't go to these coastal towns that are going to be a massacre for these coastal towns. It will absolutely destroy economies in some of these tiny little towns for people who work incredibly hard, are incredibly skilled and put food on the table.
Yeah, the only thing these lot know is about how much the Dover sole costs at the Ivy, isn't it? I mean, that's what you're dealing with. But there we are.
It's on a different planet, but they walk amongst us.
I know, tragically. Matt, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Matt Vickers, Shadow Minister for Immigration, Crime and Policing there. Astonishing that Greggs are going to have to just completely remodel all of their shops, basically, because they haven't got room to put all the stuff from the fridge behind the counter. They're going to have to move the fridge and move the counter, which is going to cost them a bucket load of money. Can you imagine how much that's going to cost in every single Greggs? I don't know how many Greggs outlets there are, but there must be thousands because they're everywhere. It's absolutely shocking. Coming up, we're going to speak to Rupert Bell, Talk's royal correspondent, because on the front page of The Sun today, you've got King Charles and you've got Bex. David Beckham, poshest and Bex. They met each other yesterday at the Chelsea Flower Show. Oh, and Meghan's been up to something as well. We'll talk to him about that. This is Talk.
EU fisheries all still allowed access, particularly French and Spanish boats, but French, this is a big sticking point for them, into British waters currently anyway. But the idea was going to be gradually going down and down and down over the years, and that would allow the British fishing industry to build back up because of they have exclusive access to our fishing waters. That's kind of done and dusted. Now, Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, said if this is true, this is the end of the British fishing industry. I assume that Keir Starmer thinks, if that is the case, that that's a price worth paying.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:48. I'm Mike Graham. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here in about 10 minutes' time. Here's one from Jacqueline in Liverpool. The definition of a traitor, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, is a person who is not loyal or stops being loyal to their own country, social class, beliefs, etc. That's exactly what Starmer is. Why had this king not used his power to dissolve this government? Well, a lot of people would wish he would do that. John says this: brilliant show as usual. Wow, what a breath of fresh air Sarah Poachin is. A leader in waiting, puts all other current leaders in the shade. Big question is, how can we get rid of the current government legally, as 4 years is a disaster? And one final one here on the subject of the football as well. Mike from Bill in Crowbridge. What a great political team Lineker and Starmer would make. At least Lineker was a great footballer. Yeah, can you imagine? He'll be signing himself up to the Labour government soon, and perhaps they'll put him in charge. Maybe they'll make him the football regulator. Can you imagine? That would be dreadful, wouldn't it? Let's talk to Rupert Bell, though, Talk's royal correspondent. Very good morning to you, Rupert.
Morning.
Happy to see you, because we've been talking about nothing but the European Union this morning, so now we've got a chance to do something slightly different before we end. Poshest and Bex on the front page of the Sun this morning. Rather nice picture of them inside, meeting the King and the King of what was the football world, I suppose, meeting up at the Chelsea Flower Show. Apparently gifts were exchanged for Beck's 50th birthday party.
Yeah, roses. A special rose, the King's Rose. And he went to the Chelsea Flower Show yesterday, obviously one of the biggest flower shows in the world. And the King going there, he's a very keen gardener, as we all know. And Bex has now got, excuse me, has got into the gardening. We've seen him beekeeping, talking Instagram, talking to his roses, talking to his chickens. So he's a bit of a country bumpkin. Oh.
Yes. You're right down there, Rupert. Do you need some time for a glass of water? I can.
Well, I'm all right now. I'm back on track here. Apologies for that.
That's
but
all right.
The fact of the matter is they are good friends now, and they see quite a lot of each other.
Yeah.
He's been working with the King's Foundation. But it is interesting. We're seeing this sort of playing out. Bex is meeting the King while Meghan and Harry are meeting Bex's estranged son, Brooklyn. I mean, it's all, it's a slightly strange world we're living in at the moment, of these estranged families also wanting to grab all the headlines while Bex goes about his business meeting the King. Obviously, he's very keen to get a knighthood, I think, at some stage. But, he is a PR machine, and they do genuinely seem to like each other. And it is quite interesting the way it's all playing out. Both Harry and Meghan and Brooklyn and his wife basically say that they've not been treated well by their respective parents, and that Bex and Posh, their PR guy, is basically belying what's really a pretty strange, dysfunctional family. This is what he says. So it's all a bit unsavoury. But the people in California seem to now be getting together and swapping stories, it would seem, about how they've been mistreated. Oh, my dear, these billionaire children have been
Isn't it
mistreated.
shocking? Because I noticed from the Sunday Times rich list at the weekend that the Posh and Beck's fortune has absolutely ballooned. It started off, I think, a few years ago with a few million, 20 million or something. It's now 550 million quid's worth, their business, apparently.
Well, you've got to admire him since football. And actually, fashion industry is not easy to make money. So I think it's the good work of, obviously, Posh. She comes with sort of regular income, I'm sure, from whatever during her time in the Spice Girls and a bit of music. But the fashion industry is an expensive one to be involved in. Yet here, but Beckham just seems to be a PR machine and continuing to be so. Hence the reason why they are worth so much money. They had a successful Netflix documentary, in contrast to the one produced by Meghan and Harry. Although that was big numbers, it didn't get the awards that the Posh and Beck's one, which was a PR masterclass on how to do a documentary and sort of confront the issues. But my goodness me, they sugar-coated some of the stories that have obviously affected them over the years.
Well, this picture will infuriate the old Montecito massive, won't it? They'll be looking at, there's your, they'll be saying to Brooklyn Beckham, there's your dad cozying up to the king, that horrible racist man, oh no, sorry, we didn't mean that. And they're sort of fellow travellers because, as you say, they feel terribly badly treated. But the truth of the matter is that, the men, both Brooklyn Beckham and Prince Harry, are men who have been sort of led astray by these rather grasping wives of theirs. And as a result, they've fallen out with their own families.
Well,
that's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah, it would seem. Well, it is the truth. They have fallen out. Brooklyn Beckham's wife is the daughter of a hugely rich billionaire in America, and yet I think she's been dabbling at being an actress, and Brooklyn's been dabbling at various things. I'm told he gets signed up to do the odd expensive media campaigns. He's claiming to be a bit of a cook, and if you look at it, Brooklyn says he's a bit of a cook, and Meghan says she's a bit of a cook. So I imagine they're exchanging flower sprinkles.
No doubt. I don't think I'd want to go round to either one of their houses for dinner, judging by the way I've seen what they cook, because I've seen Brooklyn Beckham's attempts at cooking, and he's not much better than she is.
Well, yeah, so I'm sure they in their beautifully fitted out kitchen, they obviously swap tales of what they do in the kitchen. And obviously Meghan's got another of her podcasts that comes out as she's interviewed another, this time a very successful businesswoman, Cassandra Thurswell, who runs a company called Kitsch, which I think is fairly appropriate for them, if you see what I mean, because I would have to say Brooklyn and Nikki are definitely very kitsch. But this woman is a genuine successful businesswoman. But the early indications, again, it's all about Meghan saying how she is building up a business and talking in this sort of cliche way that she does. So I have to say, this series of podcasts from Meghan are so dull, so self-absorbed, but what else do you expect?
I know, absolutely ridiculous. Meanwhile, it's their 7th wedding anniversary, right? Sun did a big piece up the other day of the 7-year itch. She's decided, in her wisdom, to put out a massive Instagram, basically a sort of collection of photos, a photo montage featuring treasured and at times highly personal family pictures charting their love story. I mean, for somebody who likes privacy, this is quite a revelation, isn't it?
She has, they want privacy, but they want the media. And this is why the hypocrisy is writ large with Meghan and Harry. And that is the problem. They want one thing, but they want everything on their terms. Yeah. And that is, and even at the wedding, she talks about how, it's a real love story. It's a fairy tale. That's what she's trying to create, that this is a fairy tale love story between these two. But at the moment, Harry looks rudderless. He's got problems with his various charities. Yeah. He's not, I don't know what he's got to do. Meghan obviously is trying to push on with her various businesses and her cooking program, which I have to say again, you made me watch, Mike, and it was, thank you for that.
No, my pleasure.
I've just felt so privileged when you made the call and said, could you take one for the team? And so I did, Mike. But here we go. But she is trying, at least, whether it's going well or not is debatable, but at least she seems to have things going on. Whereas I'm not actually sure what Harry's got sort of cooking at the moment in terms of long-term prospects. Because Sentibali's up the Swanee at the moment.
Suing everybody. He's got nobody to talk to anymore, because, I mean, at least he used to keep himself occupied probably talking to lawyers about 4 hours a day. Now he doesn't even get to do that.
No, he's not. And it is, look, he's involved with Invictus Games, which will be interesting because it's next staged in Birmingham.
Oh, yeah. I hope they got rid of the rats by then.
Well, there might be. It's going to be at the NEC, and I know what the plans are. It's going to be fantastic. Well, it should be fantastic. Rats, hopefully, will have been sorted out.
That would be
good. But will Meghan come for that? I mean, because of the security issues. Well, it's the security issue is such smoke and mirrors. Yet you see other members of the royal family who are non-working royals just getting on with it. Beatrice and Eugenie just get on with their, occasionally doing a few public duties or go and get involved in causes, but there's not a great security arrangement around there. I mean, it's, again, just something I just don't understand why Harry can't just switch a light bulb on, or maybe there just isn't one to switch on. That may be part of the problem.
I think
and just realise which is one of the problems. And he should be coming back here. But unfortunately, he's created a rod for his own back. And obviously, I don't think his wife is desperate to come here at all. So it's a convenient excuse, I'm absolutely sure.
Well, that definitely suits me. Rupert, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Julie Hartley-Brewer's arrived, so I've got to let you go. Obviously, it's far more important.
Can you tell him to go and put some sun cream on next time he's on his holes?
Well, never mind that. I thought he was going to choke when he started talking to me. He could barely speak. I
just want to say happy anniversary to Meghan and Harry.
Yeah. Do you think you're doing a pin board at any point, maybe?
No, and definitely not one that has been that organised. Yeah.
No.
I mean, yes.
Lovely,
there's just casually chosen photographs done by professionals. Yeah.
Shall we get that? There is a final. Do you want to hear a poem about David Lammy? Gaz.
Are you sure you can read this out on air? I'm not sure many poems about Lammy.
We did it before. So have a go. Have a listen.
Morning, Mike. Great show, mate. Gaz from Pontefract. 6 hours in a cab with David Lammy and don't get paid, that's a double whammy. He made a right old mess, seats covered in food. That's not the way, it's just plain rude. What did he do to kill the time? Stuff his chops with cheese and wine. Read a book, draw a doodle, power through a beef pot noodle. He's certainly getting bigger on that there world stage. On the taxpayer's quid, it's all the rage.